Chapter 969. Xiao Shen was stunned when she heard this. Then, she lowered her head and pondered. Chan Palace also had its own inheritance. Even though the sect was small and weak, it could not be abandoned easily in the name of deceiving and destroying the ancestors. However, the meaning of these words did not seem to be for them to be disciples, but to be vassals outside the sect. It was common for small sects to submit to large sections. For example, there were many sects on the Fengling Ocean that relied on the three major powers. She thought for a long time before asking carefully, "Is Perfected Wei saying that my Chan Palace should be attached to Qinsong School?" Wei Zihong said, "I don't want you to enter Qinsong School. I want you to belong to my Yaoyin clan." Xiao Shen was a little confused and asked, "Yaoyin clan?" Elder Wen knew a little about the relationship between the two. He came up and whispered a few words, briefly explaining the situation. Only then did Xiao Shen understand. She felt that she could not make the decision and said, "Perfected Wei, this is a serious matter. Can you allow me to discuss it with the elders?" Wei Zihong did not force her and said, "Palace Master Xiao, do as you please." Xiao Shen bowed and retreated to the side. She called everyone together and asked, "Elders, what do you think?" Elder Daoren said, "I think it's possible. Qinsong School is a large sect of the Xianmen sect. There are 12 Taoist masters in the sect. There is a way out for Qinsong." However, there were also people who disagreed. Perfected Wei wants to borrow our strength to fight against Yu Xiao. However, if this calamity passes and Yu Xiao refuses to let go, Perfected Wei is Perfected Zhang's disciple and may not be able to do anything to him. However, can our Chan Palace really be safe? When the other elders heard this, they all looked worried. Xiao Shen could not make up her mind. Seeing that Elder Wen did not say a word, she said, "Elder Wen, what do you think?" Elder Wen smiled bitterly. "Palace Master, just now, when Perfected Wei tells us about him killing Zhou Zishang, our Chan Palace has no choice. Our Chan Palace has no other choice. Either we fall out with him, capture him and hand him over to Yu Xiao, or we join his sect, no matter what choice we make. We'll have to offend one of them eventually." Xiao Shen sighed softly and said, "Elder Wen has spoken of the crux of the matter. In the end, it is difficult to satisfy both sides. Many of the seniors of my Chan Palace were defeated by the Yu Xiao school. In my heart, I am biased towards Perfected Master Wei. What do you all think?" The elders looked at each other and said, "Everything is up to Palace Master." Xiao Shen said happily, "Since all the elders agree, then it's decided." She moved with light steps. Arriving in front of Wei Zihong, she bent her knees and bowed deeply, saying, "Our Chan Palace is willing to serve Yaoyin as the upper sect. As long as Zhenren Wei nods, we can immediately make an oath." Wei Zihong nodded and took out a contract. The two of them swore a blood oath on the spot and engraved it. After both of them used their hand seals, the talismans trembled and transformed into two streaks of spiritual light that flew into their foreheads. Once this oath was made, they would all become members of the same sect. Although the cultivators of Chan Palace still did not know where the way out was. However, they had entered the Qinsong School's side and their expressions became much more relaxed. Xiao Shen then dared to ask, "How does Perfected Master Wei plan to deal with Perfected Zhou?" Wei Zihong looked confident and said, "Palace Master Xiao, there are restrictions set up by the predecessors in this small world. No one from the Grotto Heaven is allowed to enter. However, if there is no one presiding over it, it won't be difficult for Zhou Ruing to enter in 4 to 5 days at most. However, if we find the location of the restrictions and use mana to protect it, we can keep her out." Xiao Shen's eyes lit up and she said, "Where is the restriction?" Wei Zihong said, "Then I will need all of you to help. It is in this small world. Most of it is in a place where spiritual vigor is flourishing. If we split up and search, it won't be difficult to find it." Xiao Shen said seriously, "Since we have become Perfected Master's disciples, we should help each other. I will go and arrange the people now." Wei Zihong said, "Palace Master Xiao, wait. There is one more thing. We have to be on guard before the door closes. We should leave 1 or 2 people to guard." Xiao Shen asked doubtfully, "Didn't you say that Zhou Ruing can't enter?" Wei Zihong smiled and said, Zhou Ruing can't enter, but she is not the only one in the Yuxiao school. It isn't difficult to summon 1 or 2 third-stage cultivators here. Xiao Shun's heart jumped when she heard that, and she secretly blamed herself for being careless. Elderwin interrupted, Perfected Master Wei is so thoughtful that I can't wait. I just don't know, if such a person is here, how are we going to resist? Wei Zihong said, When I came out, I brought along a few magical weapons, and one of them is an array map. But it is inevitable that you are not familiar with it, so you need to practice it a few times first. Elderwin smiled and said, What a coincidence. Speaking of array maps, I have one here, and it is our Chan Palace's most valuable treasure. Just now the 4 of us have joined forces and trapped a 3rd-stage realm demon cultivator who entered this world. If it wasn't for that perfected Master Zhou who came later on, he would not have escaped death. But even this perfected master had to use some skill to break it. But this map is slightly damaged. I wonder if perfected master has any treasured materials of the 5 elements so that we can quickly refine it. Wei Zihong didn't hesitate at all and searched his sleeves for a while before throwing out a few jade bottles and said, If you think it's too little, come back and ask me for more later. Elderwin took it over and channeled his mana into it. He said in surprise, It's enough. Xiao Shun saw that the arrangements here were done and went back to instruct her disciples. There were a total of 7 elders from Chan Palace, and one of them was enough to refine the array map. After receiving her instructions, Elderwin was left here while the rest flew off in different directions. Wei Zihong looked at the crowd leaving and said, Just now, I have also decided on a place. I will bid farewell to Palace Master first and will return in at most 2 to 3 days. Xiao Shun took out a few talismans from her pouch and said, This is a letter from our Chan Palace. If Perfected Master has any summons, just activate this letter and we will rush over as soon as possible. Wei Zihong didn't stand on ceremony and took it over. Then a black smoke rose from his body and wrapped around him as he flew towards the horizon. When he reached the sky, his brows were more solemn. Even though he had been calm on the surface from the beginning to the end, but in his heart he knew that the words he said just now were actually just to calm the hearts of the people. After the Golden Pavilion was opened, he often went to read Taoist books and knew that there were too many tricks in the grotto heaven. He wasn't sure how long the restriction of this small world could last. However, he could feel that there seemed to be something that was related to his family coming over here. It was just that this feeling was very vague and intermittent. He couldn't tell when exactly it would arrive, so he could only think of a way to get everyone to work together to delay it. Every moment he could delay was a moment. One day when he was flying, he suddenly felt something flying towards his house. He raised his hand to catch it and took a look, but his eyes turned cold. This was a flying talisman used within the Qinsong school. Other than the disciples of the school, no one else could take it. Without knowing the incantation, it was hard to use it. And in this small world, other than him, the only one who could send this flying letter was the remaining evil spawn of the Su family. He snorted and flew towards the place where the talisman light came from. About 3 minutes later, he saw a high mountain range that stretched for hundreds of meters. There was already a Taoist holding a horsetail whisk waiting there respectfully. From afar, he said, Perfected Master Wei, please come here to speak. Wei Zihong looked around in the air and confirmed that there were no traps before descending. He said coldly, Su Yihui, you're quite courageous to dare to invite me here. Su Yihui bowed. He said, I am also in a difficult position. If that spiritual Master Zhou enters the small world, I won't be able to protect you. I have nowhere to hide. If I don't do this, I won't be able to save myself. Wei Zihong reacted quickly, frowning, Were you nearby when we were talking yesterday? Su Yihui replied, I'm just relying on a magic treasure that can distinguish spirits through sound. It's not my own ability. Wei Zihong looked at him and said, What do you have to say? You may speak now. Su Yihui saw that Wei Zihong did not shout, Kill, as soon as he came up. He knew there was room for discussion. Thereupon he said, The old Su wants to ask Wei Zhenren for a small advantage. Let's join hands to resist the external enemy first. As for the other matters, can we put them aside for now? Wei Zihong did not beat around the bush with him. He asked, "What method do you have?" Suiwa said, "My Su clan's treasure, the Qinyang drum, is in my hands. I've heard that perfected Master Wei has a first-rate formation diagram in his hands. I'm willing to ask this treasure to come out and suppress this formation. This way, unless Zhou Ruing's true body comes here, he definitely won't be able to charge in." Wei Zihong looked over with a scrutinizing gaze and discovered that Suihua's expression was calm. After a while, he said, "Let's do it like this. In 3 days, come find me in front of the Realm Pass." He was about to leave when Suihua called out to him, "Perfected Master Wei, if I hand over the true dragon manor, can the sect pardon the old Su's crime?" Wei Zihong stopped and turned around. Seeing that Suihua's expression did not seem to be fake, he said, "This is not something I can make a decision on. I need to first report this to my master." Suihua knew that what he said was true, so he sighed and said, "Then we'll talk about it after we pass this trial." Outside the small world, Zhou Ruing tried several methods to break the seal, but she could not open it as she wished. Even though she knew dozens of methods, if she were to try them one by one, it would take at least 30 to 40 days. She was not willing to waste these days, so she first used her mana to form a talisman and circulated it into the void. 7 to 8 days later, a rainbow light flew to the island. When it landed, a Daoran came out. He looked to be in his 70s, his face was full of wrinkles, and his hair was sparse. He came up and bowed, saying, Perfected Master, summon me here urgently. What instructions do you have for me?" Zhou Ruing said, "Xie Yun, if I remember correctly, there are still 30 years left. Are you going to reincarnate?" Xie Yun said, "Thank you for your concern. Disciple indeed only has 30 years left to live." There was a rule in the Yuxiao sect. If one was not a disciple of the Zhou or Wu family, the Yuanian cultivators would have to reincarnate after their 800 years of life, and could no longer cultivate in the sect. Zhou Ruing said, "I pity that it is not easy for you to cultivate, so today I'll give you a chance to make a contribution. This small world in front of the door, if you can take it down, I can go to my Shixiang and ask him to give you another 100 years. What do you think?" Xie Yun seemed to be surprised and happy at the same time. He showed a grateful expression and bowed. Xie Yun is willing to accept perfected master's kindness. Zhou Ruing was satisfied. "Good, don't delay any more, go quickly." Xie Yun bowed again, and without hesitation he stepped into the realm gate. Once he entered the inner room, he saw lightning, wind, and fire descending from above. He knew that there was a trap on the other side, so he stopped moving and immediately took out a talisman that looked like a tower. He sat inside. He did not try to break through the formation, he only focused on defending. In his heart, he was very clear that the people in this small world were not easy to get along with, otherwise, Zhou Ruing would have found his own people long ago. Why would he give the credit to his own family? If he really listened to him and risked his life, his death would be in vain. Therefore, he was prepared to stay here for a few days, and when it was about time, he would retreat. At that time, Zhou Ruing could not blame him for not doing his best. Floating astronomy. Elder Yu and the other 3 elders retracted some of their magic power after receiving their instructions. With this retreat, the formation's qi was reduced by 30%. Xie Yun immediately felt the pressure on him lessen greatly. He knew that just now introducing himself had an effect. However, he was also tactful and remained motionless. The longer he persisted, the more it showed that he was contributing. Later on, when he went out, he would have an excuse. 5 days later, Xie Yun had used up all the elixirs in his body and his magic power was also gradually running out, so he didn't force himself anymore. He kept the pagoda and stumbled towards the realm gate. When he was outside, he tumbled to the ground. He struggled to get up and panted, "Disciple is useless, I have failed Venerable's trust." Zhou Ruing looked over and saw that he was in a sorry state. He said unhappily, "What? You can't even take down a few people?" Xie Yun lowered his head and said, "Disciple just now entered and thought that I could succeed, but I didn't expect the other side to set up a formation in front of the gate. Disciple tried everything but still couldn't get out. Disciple is useless, please punish me, Venerable." Zhou Ruiying didn't think that Xie Yun would agree on the surface but oppose on the inside. He was just annoyed that he was useless. After asking for a few details, he said, "Forget it, I can't blame you. I've seen that formation before, it's not easy to break through. I already have some ideas. Wait at the side, I might need your help later." Xie Yun hurriedly said, "Thank you, Venerable." During this period of time, Zhou Ruiying also thought of looking for another person, but after thinking for a long time, he finally gave up on this idea. This time, in order to ensure that his family could suppress the demonic cave, Yu Xiao sent out many third-stage foreign cultivators to guard one side to deter the Devil's Doctrine cultivators. If only Xie Yun was sent out, it might give the Devil's Doctrine an opportunity. If she found another person, there would be a flaw in the defense, and the blame would fall on her. As for the Zhou disciples in the family, there were many suitable ones, but without Master Lingya's permission, she couldn't order them around. But maybe she was lucky. After trying less than 5 kinds of prohibition, she actually found the right way. Even if Xie Yun didn't come out, she would personally lift the prohibition. After concentrating for a long time, she pointed at the realm gate. The surrounding spiritual vigor shook slightly, but the stone mirror didn't change at all. It was just that the prohibition inside was gradually dissolving. At this moment, Wei Zihong, who was sitting in the realm, suddenly stood up. His eyebrows opened slightly, and he stared at the realm gate for a while, saying in a deep voice, "Zhou Ruiying has found the way to break the prohibition." When everyone heard this, they were all shocked. They turned to take a look, but they didn't see any movement. They could only sense it if they tried hard to sense it. This change was extremely subtle, but if it wasn't for someone reminding them, they wouldn't have noticed it no matter what. Elder Wen asked anxiously, "Venerable Wei, what should we do now?" Wei Zihong said, "Let's act according to the plan we discussed earlier. I'll go change the prohibition. Palace Master Shao will lead the people to guard here." He saw the fear in everyone's eyes and said, "Without 3 to 5 days, she won't be able to break in. Everyone can rest assured." The elders couldn't help but feel awkward. Shao Shen said seriously, "Venerable Wei, don't worry. We've made a vow that our Chan Palace will guard this place to the death." Wei Zihong glanced at her and said, "After this, I can introduce Palace Lord to my master." Shao Shen's eyes were filled with surprise. She had been worried that even if they could escape unscathed, they would have offended Yu Xiao. They wouldn't be able to stay on the Fengling Ocean for long and would have to move to the north. However, the Yaoyin clan also had disciples, so they naturally had to separate them. The future of the Chan Palace was still unknown. But with this promise, he was relieved. That Zhang Zhenren was the Dark Azure Sect's Duzhen Hall master. If he could have an audience with him, even if it was just a few words of encouragement, his sect would be able to stand firm. After Wei Zihong gave his instructions, he flew up and flew to the place where the prohibition was. As early as a few days ago, he had already found its location. If it wasn't for the fact that he was afraid that when the prohibition on the door changed, no one would be able to recognize it, he would have stayed there. A day later, he came to a river valley filled with pebbles. After leaping over the sky, he went downstream for a few miles and arrived in front of a creek. The water swirled here and gathered into a whirlpool. This place was very hidden, and it was normal for spiritual vigor to leak out. The people who came here to investigate had missed it many times. Later on, he didn't care about the consumption of his own qi and used the divine eye on his forehead to observe, and only then did he find it. The conveyance light drilled in and went more than 1,000 feet into the water. He saw 2 cracks in the stone below, which looked like a pair of eyes. 2 undercurrents passed through it, one was exhaling, the other was inhaling, and they circled around, indicating yin and yang. He dispersed the conveyance light and followed the flow of the water. After 3 rounds in the eyes, he felt that the scenery in front of him changed, and he arrived in a stone room. It was about 2 feet wide, and there was a skeleton sitting inside, leaning against a black stone tablet. A jade viper was lying on top of the tablet. He took a few steps forward, pressed his hand on the stone tablet, and channeled mana into it. At this moment, as long as he channeled his mana, he could change the prohibition on the realm gate, and then Zhou Ruiying would return empty-handed. However, as he thought about it, he let go of his hand. Just like what happened to Xiao Shen and the rest, Zhou Ruiying would need at least 3 to 5 days to open the prohibition. He could not make a move first, and only change it when he was about to succeed. Not only could he destroy his previous efforts, but he could also delay it for a few more days. He could sense that the item that was beneficial to him would only arrive after some time. Without this item, it would be difficult to fight against Zhou Ruiying, so he would delay it for as long as he could. With a plan, he sat cross-legged on the stone tablet. In a flash, 3 days passed. He didn't dare to wait any longer, so he placed his hand on the stone tablet and activated his mana. Outside the small world, just as Zhou Ruiying was about to succeed, she suddenly felt the restrictions suddenly change. Her previous efforts were all for naught. She couldn't help but feel surprised. She frowned and thought to herself, even if the person inside the small world found the mechanism of the restriction, I used it so covertly, how did the other party notice it? She thought about it and finally concluded that it was due to her own carelessness and negligence that caused her to reveal a flaw. She needed to be extra careful. However, in the following days, every time she found a way to open the restriction would change ahead of time. She had been trapped here for more than 2 months. However, at this point, the people of the inner realm had run out of luck. There were only a few variations to the restriction. Zhou Ruiying gradually understood it after a long period of time as she repeatedly tried to understand it. On this day, she suddenly felt that the restriction that was changing was something she had seen before. She sneered and killing intent filled her eyes. She was annoyed that she was being held up here by a few juniors. She was thinking about how to deal with these juniors. Another 3 days passed. There was a flash of light on the realm gate as if a barrier was peeled off. Zhou Ruiying let out a snort, waved her sleeves, got up, and stepped into the small world. Inside the small world, the people of Chan Palace stood far away as if they were facing a great enemy. Some of them were trembling and couldn't hide the fear on their faces. In front of the gate, only Wei Zihong and Su Yihua were standing steadily. Wei Zihong's eyes focused in front of him. When he sensed an extremely oppressive and powerful aura about to leap over, he tossed the formation diagram he had prepared in advance into the sky. Instantly, a brilliant ray of light descended from the 4 corners and enveloped the world. Su Yihua's expression also became serious. She bowed and said, "Spiritual Master Qin Yang, please help me." A ray of light flew out and landed in the formation. The surrounding light shined brightly and the spiritual energy in the small world surged like a river. The aura suddenly increased. Just at this moment, Zhou Ruiying also took a step forward. She immediately knew that she had broken into a certain formation. She had a mocking expression and gently waved her hand. The energy surged and it seemed like she wanted to break this formation in one fell swoop. Floating astronomy. Chapter 971. Just as Zhou Ruiying's mana surged out, there were waves of wind, thunder, and starlight that echoed and flickered in the surroundings. It was like a strong wind blowing across the land. Before the chi of the formation could come close, it was swept away by the strong current. At this moment, she did not give up. She used her mana to attack the formation wall. Just as the big formation was about to be broken, a drumming sound was heard from the formation. It shook the earth gate and the vitality was activated. The spiritual vigor that was originally scattered was suddenly suppressed and subdued, and the formation was once again stabilized. Zhou Ruiying's expression froze. She stopped and said, "True treasure?" Before this, she thought that she was only dealing with a group of juniors, so she did not take it seriously. However, if the opponent was protected by a true treasure, she had to be careful. If it was a powerful defensive true treasure, as long as it was willing to be controlled by someone, it would be enough to make it difficult for her to move. If it was combined with the formation, it was possible that the split body would be left here. The moment she stopped, the formation's chi gathered again, and she struck down again. However, she was surrounded by starlight and a clear chi. Even though she was standing still, the wind, thunder, water, and fire formed by the chi of the formation could only linger outside. No matter how loud it was, it could not land. When Suihua saw this, he was deeply shocked. In the past, he read the ancient books left by the tribe. There were many sentences that described the power of the people of Dongtian, but he had never seen it in person. Right now, Zhou Ruing was only a split body, but his mana was already so shocking. If it was not for the help of the Qinyang drum, he would not be able to withstand it. How powerful was the mana of the real body? He could not help but look at Wei Zihong. That Du Zhenhao master once suppressed Yan Changxing. His mana must be even more profound and unpredictable. When he thought about this, he was deep in thought. He thought, my tracks have been exposed. The Demon Clan, Yuxiao Clan, and Qinsong Clan are all looking for me. The world is so big, there is no place for me to hide anymore. Yuxiao School is trying to suppress outsiders, and the Python Clan is not my clan. Returning the Long Mansion to Qinsong might be the only way out. Zhou Ruing was meditating with his eyes closed. He didn't seem to be moving, but he was actually sensing the flow of qi inside and outside the formation. After a while, she was able to discern the general situation of the formation. She sneered in her heart and said, even though the other side has a real treasure suppressing the formation, the people in charge are 2 or 3 juniors, and their cultivations are not up to par. Let's see how long you can keep this up. She raised her hand and made a hand seal. Immediately, she activated her mana and transformed it into strands of starlight that repeatedly washed away the formation qi layer by layer. When Wei Zihong and Suihua saw this, they hurriedly used their magic power to block it. After the starlight broke through several dozen layers of restrictions, its momentum finally came to a halt. But even so, he still had endless power. It was like the crashing of waves, layer upon layer. Wei Zihong sighed inwardly. The array he had taken out was originally used by the Yao Yin clan to guard a hall, and its true power was far more than this. However, there was no one here who was proficient in array theory. It was hard for them to unleash the magical effects of the formation, so they could only use the method of gathering spiritual energy to attack. If the opponent's technique was weaker than the formation, it would naturally suppress them. But if the opponent's mana was strong enough to the point where it could fight against the entire formation, then it would naturally become a stalemate. In less than half a day, the two of them already felt that their mana was running out. They all had a feeling that if they made a mistake, they would be suppressed by the opponent. Under such circumstances, even calling for someone to replace them wouldn't work. But if there was no one to replace them, their mana would be exhausted sooner or later, and at that time, they would still lose. Suihua saw that something was wrong and turned around, saying, Sage Wei, we need to think of a countermeasure. He looked at Wei Zihong, and seeing that he didn't speak, he continued, I have an idea. We can open a door later, and let this Zhou Ruing go inside. We can take this chance to charge out of the realm pass, and take the decree outside, and close the realm gate. If Zhou Ruing wants to find the location of the restriction mechanism, he will have to spend some time. But by that time, we will have already escaped. After a pause, he added, Sage Wei, don't worry, I can swear that I will not escape on my own. Wei Zihong didn't agree with this suggestion. If he just left like that, Zhou Ruing would definitely vent his anger on the Chan Palace cultivators. Since Shaoshan had made a contract with him, then the Chan Palace was already considered his own, and naturally, he couldn't abandon them so easily. He said in a low voice, There's no need for that. Although we can't replace people, don't forget that Palace Head Xiao still has a formation map. You can order them to set it up first, and use it to block Zhou Ruing, then we can retreat and recuperate. Suihua said anxiously, but that formation map may not be stronger than the one in Sage Wei's hands, and without the suppression of a true treasure, how long can it last? Wei Zihong said, then we'll have to rely on Sage Qinyang. Suihua immediately smiled bitterly. Qinyang had come out to help this time because he was a disciple of the Su clan, and it was a matter of life and death, so he made an exception. But he couldn't do it again. Such a true treasure was not something he could use as he pleased. But at this moment, Qinyang's true spirit suddenly said, You, Junior, really know how to order me around, but why should I help you? Wei Zihong said loudly, If Sage Wei helps me, I will definitely repay you later. Qin Yang's true spirit laughed and said, although you talk big, but seeing that your master is Hall Master Duzhen, it's not really an exaggeration. I'll remember these words. Wei Zihong got the promise from Qin Yang's true spirit in person, so he also raised his spirits and transmitted his voice outside, saying, Palace Head Xiao, even though Zhou Ruing is here as a clone, his mana is not weak. The two of us can't free ourselves for the time being, so please set up that formation map with the elders. Sage Qin Yang will go in later to hold the fort, then we will find the right time to retreat and recover mana. Please be careful. The people of Chan Palace were originally prepared to take over the position of the formation, but seeing that the two did not speak even after a long time, seeing that the situation in the formation was precarious, they were also very anxious, afraid that something might happen. Now that they heard this, they were slightly relieved. Shaoshan turned around and ordered, Elders, did you hear that? Quickly set up the formation map. Elderwen was the first to reply, I will set it up now. This matter involved their own life and death. How would the cultivators of Chan Palace dare to hesitate? Luckily, after a few times of controlling the formation map, everyone was already familiar with it. Their actions were extremely fast, and in less than half a day, the formation map was set up. Shaoshan saw that it was safe and immediately said, Sage Wei, the formation is up, the two of you can retreat. At this time, Wei Zihong and Suiwa's transcendence energy was also almost depleted, but they were barely holding on. However, in order to not cause trouble behind them, they didn't say anything. At this moment, hearing that the formation was completed, Wei Zihong said solemnly, Suiwa, you retreat first. Suiwa knew that he was not thinking for himself, but to prevent him from escaping on his own, but with the thought of just now, he had long dispelled the thought of leaving. He stood up and bowed, Sage Wei, be careful, I will retreat first. With a stomp of his feet, he turned into a ray of light and left the formation door. Originally, with the two of them working together, this formation could only barely maintain a tie, but with one person gone, it was like the palace hall had lost a pillar. It immediately swayed and was about to collapse. Wei Zihong did not panic. He took out a medicinal pill and swallowed it, then shouted loudly, gathering the formation power and rushed out, actually suppressing the starlight on the other side a little. At this time, he did not dare to hesitate anymore. He used his teleportation escape technique and instantly left the formation. Qin Yang's true spirit also turned into a ray of light at the same time, flying out. However, that formation map was too late to retract. There was only a loud sound like a mountain splitting. The entire formation had already collapsed. When Zhou Ruing saw that she'd finally broken through this barrier, she instantly wanted to charge out impatiently, but she'd only gone a few kilometers when she noticed that something was wrong. She'd actually stepped into another formation, and she couldn't help but say angrily, Junior, you're detestable. For a moment, she also felt slightly impatient. After spending so much effort to rush into this world, she thought it would be easy, but she did not expect to still be blocked here. She thought for a moment, suddenly retreated, and in the blink of an eye, she retreated out of the small world. Xie Yun was still outside. Seeing her come out, he thought that he had succeeded. He bowed and said, Congratulations on obtaining this small world, sage. Zhou Ruing's heart was stifled, but he could not flare up. His face covered with frost, he said, Follow me in. How could Xie Yun not know that he said something wrong? He hurriedly lowered his head and followed behind her, entering the small world again. After the two of them entered the small world again, Zhou Ruing said, I will suppress the spiritual opportunity of the formation power. You go into the formation and retrieve that suppression treasure. Xie Yun did not dare to disobey. He said, Disciple obeys. Zhou Ruing sat down in a lotus position. Not long after, his body suddenly emitted brilliant starlight, and that qi was suppressed. Xie Yun was proficient in the theory of formations, otherwise Zhou Ruing would not have asked him to come here. Although he was hiding in the pagoda now, not willing to break the formation, but he had also roughly seen the changes in the formation map. When he went into the formation, he would step on the formation position door every time, and it looked like he would reach the formation pivot in no time. Elderwin sensed that something was wrong, and said in shock, Not good, he wants to snatch the suppression treasure in my formation. Su Ihua, who was outside the formation, was also very anxious. The treasure was equivalent to competing with Zhou Ruiying. There was no way for him to resist, so he hurriedly said, "Sage Wei, why don't you order someone to stop this person?" Wei Zihong shook his head. Su Yihua said anxiously, "Even if he is a third-stage realm cultivator, and we are not his opponent, we can still disturb him." Wei Zihong, however, raised his head, his eyes shining, his expression slightly excited, and said, "No need." He had already sensed that the thing in the sky was getting closer and closer to him, as if it would arrive soon. At this moment, in the sky above the 9 continents, a faint dragon roar could be heard, coming from beyond the 9 heavens. Then, it shook the sky, and a ray of yang fire passed through the sky, like the rosy clouds of the morning, spreading for thousands of miles. The place where the spiritual opportunity landed was actually the Fengling Ocean. At this moment, on the Donghua continent, many people in the grotto heaven sensed it, but after a search, those who knew the origin of the treasure, except for a few, pretended not to see it. Inside the grotto heaven of the Ministry of Defense, Zhou Ruiying was originally in a stable state, but her heart did not tremble, and she did not wake up and turn around. At this moment, she also felt that there was something strange in the sky, and when she went up to sense it, she immediately knew where it came from. Her expression could not help but change, and she immediately wanted to retreat. But now that she was about to succeed, she was unwilling to retreat, so she gritted her teeth, waved her hand, and a ray of auspicious light rose, directly facing the raging fire. Floating astronomy. Chapter 972. Zhou Ruiying knew that the enchanted weapon was extremely powerful. Unless she went forward with her real body, it would be hard to block it. However, she had no intention of competing with it. She sent this wave of transcendence energy up in the sky, hoping that it would be able to restrain the treasure for a moment so that her clone below could break the formation first and kill all the cultivators inside. No matter how powerful the treasure was, if there was no one controlling it, it would not be able to take the initiative to attack. However, she didn't expect that when the cloud light collided with the yang fire chi, it didn't even slow down and was torn apart. The dragon-like golden light was still rushing straight down to the Fengling Ocean. But at this moment, a 3-legged bronze Jew flew out. It was full of energy and emitted light. When it reached the sky, it spat out thousands of cold threads. They were like ice brocade, snow silk and frost silk. They entangled with the golden light and slightly stopped its momentum. Zhou Ruiying said happily, "Senior apprentice brother?" The figure in the mirror said in a low voice, "Junior apprentice sister, be careful." Zhou Ruiying thought quickly. She knew that once her senior apprentice brother made a move, the people in Qinsong School wouldn't just sit back and watch. She quickly gathered her thoughts and ordered the clone to break the formation with all its strength. Inside the Changguan cave of Qinsong School, Sun Jinren was lying on the couch with more than 10 beauties waiting on him. Sensing the change, he sneered and said, "Do you think there's no one in Qinsong?" He sat up and grabbed an ancient barnacle with knotted roots on the table. He flicked his sleeves and threw it out, heading towards the place where the 2 treasures were fighting. On the ancient spring platform of the Xueshua sect, when Qingxiang was playing chess with his clone. Noticing the change in the sky, he thought for a moment and smiled. He raised his hand, and all the blood-red chess pieces flew up. They flew towards the barnacle. As the object flew, a thick blood aura spread out, and wherever it passed, the blood aura would spread out. Everywhere it passed, the spirit dimmed and the air was lost. But halfway there, a fishing rod flew from the north and hooked onto the barnacle's waist, making it impossible for him to get away. The 2 fought for a while. When Qingxiang knew that it was hard to break through and shook his head. Then he retracted it, and the fishing rod did not chase after it. Suddenly, it disappeared. The barnacle suddenly rose into the sky and spewed out clouds of water vapor and black smoke, forming a vast sea of clouds in an instant. Then yin and yang became thin. The sudden sound of thunder clashed with the thousands of strands of jade snow frost energy. The figure in the mirror felt that although he wasn't really fighting with the other party, he had already expended some of his essence chi. He snorted and said, "Sun Jian is an unreasonable person, there is no benefit in fighting with him." Junior sister, this senior brother can only help you to this extent. The rest is up to you. With that, the bronze Jew in the sky trembled and retracted the cold threads. With another turn, he avoided the thunderclouds and turned into a streak of light. Without this obstruction, the young fire serpent was no longer blocked. In a few breaths, it disappeared into the sea. Li Mountain Sect, Morning and Evening House. The sect master, Zhenren Yuling, stood with his hands behind his back, looking at the surging spiritual opportunity outside. He thought and said, "The calamity is coming, all sides will fight and kill each other. Where should our Li Mountain Sect go?" She relied on the legacy of her predecessors and cultivated for close to 3,000 years, almost reaching the realm of ascension. 1,000 years ago, she opened the Li Mountain Sect, which was one of the 10 sects of Shenmen. However, until now, none of the descendants were successful. Until now, they had relied on her reputation. She sighed. The reason was that the sect's foundation was too shallow. Moreover, the calamity was coming. If they wanted to protect their blood and sweat, they had to rely on a big sect to survive. Shaoqing didn't need to think too much. This sect didn't care about any other sects other than the 3 big sections. The only choice left was between Yuxiao and Qintong. Before this, she was still hesitant, but the previous scene made her make a decision. She called a pretty disciple over and softly instructed her. The disciple understood, bowed, and left the palace. Back in the pocket dimension, Zhou Ruiying's face was unsightly. Although she wanted to leave, the battle just now had been laid out in the open. If she left just like that, and word got out that she had been scared off by a few members of the younger generation, wouldn't she become the laughingstock of all her fellow Taoists? She made up her mind and decided to break the formation here, so she didn't move. And in this short period of time, Xie Yun had already rushed all the way to the center of the array. He looked at the array position and saw that there was a large drum above it, and on top of the drum sat a yellow-clothed youth. Noticing him coming over, he looked down, and although he did not say anything, Xie Yun was inexplicably shocked and took a few steps back and exclaimed, "True spirit!" Zhou Ruiying was furious from behind and scolded, "Xie Yun, what are you dawdling for? This true spirit is suppressed by my mana and can't move. Hurry up and take it down for me." Xie Yun suddenly came to his senses. He hurriedly took a step forward and was about to use his mana to absorb it. Seeing this, the youth in yellow turned around and the drum turned into a beam of light that shot straight into the sky. Once the true treasure was gone, Zhou Ruiying suddenly felt relaxed. She raised her palm and pressed down. The surrounding starlight shot out at the same time. It was several times more intense than just now. With this force, Xiao Shen and the others couldn't resist it. The formation qi that they were maintaining just now was pushed back layer by layer. Elder Wen and the other 3 elders were adjusting their breathing. Seeing that the situation wasn't right, they immediately entered the formation to help. Su Yihua anxiously stomped his feet and said, "Spiritual Master Wei, what methods do you have? Hurry up and take them out. If you delay any longer, it will be too late." Wei Zihong ignored him. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the ground and closed her eyes. Su Yihua's expression changed several times. At this moment, he almost wanted to abandon everyone and leave by himself. But in the end, he resisted the urge. Because he knew that Wei Zihong wouldn't seek her own death. She must have some sort of assurance. After a while, Wei Zihong slowly stood up and said, "If you just now leave, I won't stop you later." Su Yihua was startled and unconsciously took a step back. After Wei Zihong finished speaking, he turned his head to look at the formation. The few people in charge of the formation were already doing their best. Xiao Shen's face was pale and her body was swaying. It was obvious that she was exhausted. The rest of the people were almost the same. He said, "Everyone, retreat. Leave it to me." Hearing her call, everyone's spirits were instantly deflated. They couldn't hold on anymore and retreated. Almost at the same time, there was a loud sound by her ears. The great break also broke. Zhou Ruiying rolled up her sleeves and swept away the dust. She slowly walked forward, but her expression was extremely ugly. She could sense that the scorching light had already reached the border gate. It was just hovering outside. For some reason, it hadn't come in. At this moment, she didn't dare to rashly go out. She walked up to Wei Zihong and looked him up and down. She said, "You are Zhang Yan's disciple?" Wei Zihong said coldly, "Zhenren Zhou, please conduct yourself. My teacher is Hall Master Du Zhen. How can Zhenren call him by his name?" Zhou Ruiying said angrily, "Junior, you are rude. Do you think I can't take care of you?" At this moment, an elder of Chan Palace suddenly rushed out. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly. "Zhenren, please forgive me. I was just blinded. That's why I conspired with such a person. From now on, I am willing to serve in front of you to forgive my sins." Xiao Shen found it hard to believe. She said in shock and anger, "Elder Su, how can you do this?" Elder Su turned around and said righteously, "Palace Lord, don't you know that a wise man submits to circumstances? Listen to this old man's advice. Only by joining Yu Xiao will you have a chance at survival." Zhou Ruiying glanced at him. With a flick of his finger, a beam of starlight sprinkled down. Like snow melting under the scorching sun, it instantly killed Elder Su. Not a single trace was left. He said, "Traitor, why should I keep you alive?" Everyone was startled. Truth be told, when they saw Elder Su's actions, a few of them were somewhat tempted. However, when they saw his fate, they completely extinguished that thought. Zhou Ruiying's eyes focused on Wei Zihong. He said, "In this sea realm, the only person who can kill a disciple of my Zhou clan is you." Wei Zihong did not admit nor deny it. He only said to his left and right, "Everyone, this is a matter between me and Yu Xiao School. You can leave first." Suiwa and the people of Chan Palace could see that there was something about Wei Zihong that made Zhou Ruiying wary. They all knew that it was useless to stay here. Hearing this, they all left. Zhou Ruiying's heart skipped a beat. His eyes flashed. He said, "That's strange. Why hasn't he made a move yet? He even told these juniors to leave. Could it be that it's difficult for him to wield that treasure?" The more she thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Just now, she was also confused. How could a mere Yuanying cultivator control such a powerful killing treasure? She wanted to make a move, but she still had some misgivings. So she ordered Xie Yun, who was following behind, "Go and take care of these juniors of Qinsong School for me." Xie Yun was shocked. He said hesitantly, "Zhenren, this?" Zhou Ruiying said coldly, "What? You dare to disobey my orders?" Xie Yun was helpless. He went forward and cupped his hands. He transmitted his voice, "Fellow Taoist of Qinsong School, I'm sorry. I'm just following orders." Finishing his words, he grabbed with his hand and cast the heaven and earth imprisonment technique. Wei Zihong's figure flashed. He cast the minor universe shift and appeared 1,000 feet away in the blink of an eye. Zhou Ruiying's eyes lit up. He shouted, "Junior, I almost got tricked by you." She raised her hand and was about to make a move. However, she suddenly felt danger approaching. She knew it was bad. She hurriedly turned into a rainbow and dodged to the side. However, she felt a chill on her right shoulder. She cried out in surprise. One of her arms had already fallen. After it landed on the ground, it turned into specks of spiritual light and dissipated. At this moment, a golden light like a dragon appeared in the sky. It circled in the air and turned into a treasured axe. Wei Zihong reached out and grabbed it, holding it firmly. Seeing this, Xie Yun's body stiffened. His eyes were filled with fear, but he didn't dare to move. How could Zhou Ruiying not know that his judgment was wrong? He was unwilling to give up. He turned into a ray of light and escaped from the small world. Wei Zihong looked at the treasured axe in his hand. He stared at it for a moment. He felt an unbearable pain in the space between his eyebrows. His divine eyes suddenly opened. The mysterious dragon on the sun-embracing axe, which was originally closed, suddenly opened its eyes. Its claws and toes moved as if it had come to life. In an instant, countless scenes flashed in front of him. They seemed familiar, but also very strange. After a short moment, he took a deep breath and stepped out of the realm gate with the axe in hand. He raised his head and looked at the escaping light in the sky. A surge of courage rose in his heart. He shouted, "You want to leave? You want to leave? How can it be so easy? My axe." When he finished speaking, he held the axe with both hands and swung it in the air. Boom! A ray of light that seemed to be able to split heaven and earth flew out. The entire Fengling Ocean was split into two under this attack. Zhou Ruiying's clone that had escaped 1,000 miles away didn't even have time to dodge. It was shattered into pieces. Chapter 973. Xie Yun saw that Wei Zihong had chopped off Zhou Ruiying's arm with his axe, and then came out with his axe. His entire body was brimming with killing intent as he chased after Wei Zihong. Xie Yun didn't dare to stay here any longer, so he followed Wei Zihong out of the realm gate. But he was scared out of his wits by that heaven-shaking strike. Fearing that he would suffer the same fate, he activated his escape light and fled towards the mountain gate. Little did he know that Wei Zihong's mana was almost completely used up after that strike. He had no power to fight back now. If he went forward, he would definitely be able to take him down. But he wasn't a disciple of Zhou, so he naturally wouldn't take the risk. Although Wei Zihong's mana was used up, he didn't show it and still stood firmly in the sky. Only when he saw Xie Yun flee in panic did he secretly sigh in relief. Suiwa and the people of Chan Palace also came out at this time. He looked at the surging waves on the sea and couldn't help but ask, "Spiritual Master Wei, where is that Zhou Ruiying? Did he escape?" Wei Zihong said indifferently, "He has already been killed by me." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was greatly shocked. As they looked at the coiled battle axe in his hand that faintly emitted a ferocious aura, the words "slaughter weapon" appeared in their minds, and a strand of terror arose in their hearts. Wei Zihong adjusted his breathing and finally recovered some strength. He said, "Everyone, Zhou Ruiying's clone was killed, so he definitely hates me. Although his real body won't come personally, if he doesn't want to give up, it will be troublesome. We have to be on guard. Why don't we first return to the small world to hide for a while?" At this moment, he used the power of the axe just now. No one dared to go against his will and hurriedly agreed. Wei Zihong glanced over and saw Suihua standing at the side without moving. He said, "I thought you would find a chance to escape." Suihua sighed and said, "Although the world is big, where can I escape to?" He bowed again and said, "When the situation is settled, I will bring Spiritual Master there." Wei Zihong's heart moved. He knew that he was talking about the Long Manor. He looked at him and said, "I will report the details of this place to my master when I return." Suihua hurriedly bowed and said with gratitude, "Thank you, Spiritual Master." After a short while, the group returned to the small world. After Wei Zihong made some arrangements. Then, he went to the forbidden area alone and set up the restriction again. After meditating for a few days, he felt that his magic power had recovered, so he called Suihua over and asked about the location of the Dragon Manor. After the previous battle, Suihua had already made up his mind. He said truthfully, "Back then, after this mansion left the surging waves lake, it landed in a hidden realm in the depths of the Western Sea. At that time, ice cultivation was shallow. In the end, I had to rely on the elixirs hidden in the clan to cultivate to the Yuanying stage before I was able to see the light of day again." When Wei Zihong heard that the Long Manor was in the West Sea, he thought that it was no wonder. After passing the Middle Pillar continent and heading west, not only was the ocean boundless, but it was also a place where spiritual opportunities did not flourish. Since ancient times, there had been very few cultivators coming here. It was no wonder that they could hide until now. He said, "In a few more days. After I settle everything, I will go with you to the Long Manor." Suihua said hesitantly, "Yu Xiao is probably watching us. There might be trouble when we come and go." Wei Zihong said, "I have a killing weapon in hand. What is there to be afraid of? Moreover, the returning demon cave has appeared near Yu Xiao School, so they definitely won't try to harm me. You just need to lead the way." Suihua was full of confidence. Thinking that with a killing weapon in hand, unless Venerable Dong Tian appeared, no one would be able to do anything to him, so he nodded and agreed. Although Wei Zihong said that he didn't care about Yu Xiao, he was extremely careful in private. The Bao Yang axe was indeed powerful. However, with his current cultivation, he could barely swing the axe once. After that, he wouldn't be able to fight back. Therefore, he used the excuse of recovering his energy to build a hut on a high mountain in the small world. He didn't make any movements for half a month. And to prevent Yu Xiao from taking revenge, Shaoshan also moved the disciples of the Chan Palace into the small world, leaving only a few people outside to casually pay attention to the movements. A few days later, Shaoshan came over and said, "Venerable Wei, there is a woman outside who claims to be from Lishan sect. She wants to meet you." Wei Zihong was surprised. Lishan sect? Although his Yao Yin clan was in the west, they had no relationship with Lishan sect. However, he knew that big senior sister Lu Yenyi had dealings with Lishan sect, so he said, "Invite her in to talk." After a while, a fragrant wind blew over, and a beautiful woman came in. Her hair was combed into 2 buns, and she wore a tight-fitting shirt with an embroidered scarf draped over her shoulders. Her arms were wrapped in a flowing scarf, and she looked to be in her 20s. Her skin was like snow, and she was graceful. She came in and bowed. "Mr. Du Shan's disciple, Feng Rujia, greets sect leader Wei." "Mr. Du Shan?" Wei Zihong heard this, and his expression turned serious. He cupped his hands and said, "So it is sect leader Yuling's disciple, I greet you." He then extended his hand and invited, "Venerable Feng, please take a seat." Mr. Du Shan was the alias of Lishan sect's sect leader Yuling. It was said that before this venerable started cultivating, she was born into a family of officials. However, when she was young, her family declined, and she did not have many children. Because she was tall and handsome, she disguised herself as a man and went to the outer palace to teach for a living. At that time, her name was Du Shan, and after she entered Dao, she also used this name for a period of time. As time passed, her disciples all called her by this name. Feng Rujia said she did not dare, and went to sit at the guest seats. Wei Zihong ordered tea to be served, and then asked her why she had come. Feng Rujia said, "I won't hide it from sect leader Wei." That day, there was a strange movement in the sky, and the Bao Yang treasured battle axe fell to the South Sea. Sect leader guessed that one of Venerable Zhang's disciples was in trouble, and when my big senior sister was at Xianlu continent, Venerable Zhang once helped her. This favor must be repaid, so he ordered my daughter to come and help. Wei Zihong calmly cupped his hands and said, "Then I will have to ask fellow Taoist Feng to thank your sect leader on my behalf." Feng Rujia's beautiful eyes floated over. She was born to look at people with affection, and when she looked at people, she seemed to be deeply in love. However, her actions and expression were very dignified. When my daughter came, I heard that the external enemies had retreated. However, the devil sect is wreaking havoc, and it is not peaceful. Sect leader Wei, why don't you come to my Lishan sect and stay for a while? Wei Zihong started. The external enemies he spoke of were actually Yu Xiao school. How could Lishan sect not know? But not only did they still address him like this, they even invited him to Lishan sect as a guest. This was clearly showing goodwill to him or to Qinsong school. He looked over and said, "This is the intention of your sect leader?" Feng Rujia nodded lightly. Wei Zihong thought for a while and said, "I have orders from the sect, and temporarily cannot go to Lishan sect. After the matter is settled, I will definitely pay a visit to your sect." The invitation of the sect leader of Lishan sect had great implications. If he was just an ordinary disciple, he might not dare to easily agree. However, he still had another identity, and that was the sect leader of Yaoyin clan. Even if the sect thought it was impossible, there was still room for negotiation. And Feng Rujia only respectfully addressed him as sect leader Wei. This was probably also the reason. Feng Rujia smiled gently and stood up. She said, "Since sect leader Wei still has matters to attend to, then this little sister will not stay any longer. I will return to report." After Wei Zihong personally sent her out of the small world, he turned back and called Su Iwar over. He said, "Make some preparations. In a few days, I will go with you to the dragon residence." Outside the 9 heavens, Zhang Yan stood on a broken star. He was using a mighty force to slowly move it towards the land of the 9 continents. In the future, when the Qinsong school launched its attack, the opponents he would face would not just be one or two. It did not feel like much at the moment, but if he was surrounded by many people, the slightest delay would be fatal. Only a talisman that he personally refined could be of use. Since he started cultivating, there was only one such talisman, and it was the earth-splitting heaven and earth leaf. At the moment, there were at most 500 years until the calamity. With his spiritual power, if he followed the prescribed order, it would be almost impossible to nurture it. However, apart from this, there was another shortcut. There were many natural treasures in the world. Because they were born with extraordinary foundations, it was easier for them to awaken their spirits. Therefore, his plan was to gather all the natural treasures and refine the heaven and earth leaf again to make it complete. This way, it would be much easier to nurture the true spirit. This time, when he was cultivating in the virtual sky, he had collected many rare treasures. He could melt them into the heaven and earth leaf and use it to reconstruct the body. Floating astronomy. Chapter 974. After Wei Zihong decided to go to the West Sea True Dragon's residence, he didn't leave immediately. He now saw this small world as something in his pocket and was prepared to return to the mountain gate and present it to his master together with the dragon residence. Thus, he had some considerations. If he left and this place was taken away by Yu Xiao, it wouldn't be appropriate. Thus, before he left, he specially summoned the palace master of Cicada Palace, Xiao Shen, and ordered her to guard this place tightly while he was away. Xiao Shen, however, was extremely worried and said, "Jinren's order, Xiao Shen will naturally obey. However, once Jinren leaves, if Yu Xiao sends people again, I'm afraid Cicada Palace won't be able to hold them off. Why don't Jinren inform the palace master of Duzhen Hall to send a few more Shangjin here to hold the fort?" Wei Zihong learned from Bao Yang Roar that his master was still outside the virtual sky and couldn't care about this place for the time being. However, he didn't say it out loud and only said, "Such a small matter, there's no need to alarm my master. I have a method that can help you get through this." He took out a pearl from his sleeve and said, "This is the double image pearl. It can reflect my appearance inside. Using mana, it can be released. It looks no different from a real person. People who aren't close to me won't be able to see anything wrong. Every few days, you can hold a banquet for cultivators and place this pearl on the banquet. If they see me, they will be afraid of the power of the killing true weapon and won't easily come to attack." Xiao Shen took a few steps forward and kept the double image pearl. She bowed and said, "Xiao Shen obeys. I only hope that Jinren will leave soon." Wei Zihong nodded and said, "Palace Master Xiao, don't worry. Since all of you have entered my sect, I won't abandon you." After everything was settled, on the second day, he and Suiwa snuck under the sea and left the Fengling Ocean, heading west. In this South Sea, the cultivators here were either exterminated by Yu Xiao or escaped to the Fengling Ocean. Therefore, there weren't many cultivators along the way. They only needed to be careful to avoid Yu Xiao's eyes and ears, and naturally arrived at the West Sea smoothly. At this place, because it was close to the central pillar continent, it could be considered the Shaoqing sect's territory. They no longer had to worry about the Yu Xiao school. Hence, the two of them floated to the surface of the sea and released the ocean boat to move forward. After flying for more than 10 days, the two of them suddenly saw a spectacular scene. The sea was surging, the waves were swirling, and there were tens of thousands of porpoises swimming in the same direction, stretching for hundreds of miles. As for the leader, it was a beast cultivator that had taken human form. He had a boorish appearance and was dressed in coarse clothes. From time to time, flocks of birds would fly by, chirping in the air, showing a thriving vitality. This island seemed to have stood there for thousands of years, but in their eyes, they could see something different. Su Yihua concluded, this place was built by piling up earth and stones, and there was a spirit-gathering formation outside. However, to build such a boundary, even if it was Jinren Yuanying, I'm afraid it would take hundreds of years. Wei Zihong looked back and forth and said, "This place looks like it is going to open a door on the sea and build a mansion." Su Yihua asked, "Jinren Wei, do you want to go and meet him?" Wei Zihong shook his head and said, "It is a coincidence that this person is here. Since it has nothing to do with us, let's not care about him. I will first follow you to that long manor. Isn't this person going to preach next month? If it is suitable then, we can come and visit." Suiwa said, "Jinren's words make sense." The two of them didn't disturb that priest Li and went around this place, heading southwest for thousands of miles before diving into the sea. After a few hours, Wei Zihong gradually felt that the water was as heavy as a mountain, so he summoned a protective treasure light to protect his body. He focused his eyes and looked down, and saw that there were mountains and peaks, as well as valleys and ravines, crisscrossing and uneven. At this time, Suiwa leaped forward and turned around a hill. He also followed, and just as he went around it he saw a cave not far away. The mouth of the cave was filled with air, and beads of foam flew everywhere. There were several strange fish that looked like turtles and clams, and their bodies were flat, lying on the edge of the cave, swallowing and spitting. When they saw the two of them coming, they shook their bodies and made way. Wei Zihong said, "Did you raise this thing?" Suihua transmitted his voice and said, "That's not it. These few monsters sensed the benefits of the long manor, so they came to absorb the spiritual opportunity. I chased them away several times, but they didn't leave. However, I saw that they could come and go without any hindrance, and they often kill monsters everywhere, so I let them go. I only used them to guard the long manor, and after that, nothing happened." Wei Zihong took a look and said, "This thing seems to be a clam recorded in the water essence strange records. I heard that its body is as hard as steel, and mana can't harm it. However, it only feeds on rotten grass, so it isn't a vicious creature." Suiwa sighed, "Jinren Wei's knowledge is vast, I can't compare to you." He raised his hand and pointed ahead. "The long manor is inside, but if we go further, there will be poisonous underground fire, and we will need to use a talisman to cross it." Wei Zihong said, "That's easy." He waved his sleeve and summoned a reed mat. There was a flash of spiritual light on it, and the water flow was slightly divided. He first sat on it, then called Suiwa up. After sitting down, they used their mana to move forward. As soon as they entered the cave, thick smoke and turbid dust surged towards them. There was actually blue fire mixed inside, and red spots could be seen on the stone walls on both sides. There was a bright yellow spiritual light that flickered like clouds, sometimes bright and sometimes dark. The path in the cave was winding and rugged, but the two of them had high mana, so they didn't encounter any obstacles. This time, they didn't go far before they entered a spacious cave. There were pearls embedded in the walls on both sides, shining brightly. At this time, the water flow gradually receded, revealing a row of 30 feet long jade stairs. In the middle of the stairs, there was a copper ring and a golden plate. Every time a drop of water splashed down, there would be a tinkling sound. Wei Zihong looked for a while and said, "You really put in a lot of effort here." Suihua smiled bitterly, "When I was trapped under the sea, I only focused on cultivation and wanted to escape as soon as possible. I didn't have the time to do this. This wasn't built by me, it was originally here. I don't know whose cave it was." Wei Zihong said, "If we go further west, we will reach the west 3 continents. Maybe it was left behind by a senior that day. But that Song Long was originally the dragon god of the sea, and had countless concubines. Maybe this is one of its secret hideouts." Suihua heard this and smiled, "Maybe it's true. Otherwise, why would the dragon residents move to this place?" The two of them talked as they walked. Finally, they arrived in front of a stone door. It was more than 10 feet tall, and there were patterns of ripples and clouds on the door. When the pearl light shone on it, it seemed to be floating. At this moment, it was half closed, leaving only a small gap. Suihua stood in front of the door and said, "Jinren, this is it." Wei Zihong stepped forward and gave a light push. The stone door rumbled as it moved inwards. The divine eye on his forehead opened, and a ray of light swept past. Seeing that there were no restrictions, he stepped inside. After passing through 2 layers of palace halls, he saw another 2 sets of stone doors. However, more than half of them were already broken, and they were extremely broken. Suihua sighed. That year, the mountain gate detected the plot of the clan and ordered Jinren-chi to lead the attack. The 5 Zenrins in the clan had no choice but to sacrifice their lives to activate the killing sword to break this door. Wei Zihong did not say anything and stepped inside. When he reached the inner room, he realized that he was standing on a copper plate with a circumference of 1,000 feet. In the middle of it, there was a huge stone tablet. There was nothing around it except for a thick chain hanging down from the top, leading to the dark depths below. Su Yihua followed closely behind. He pointed below and said, "Jinren, the remains of the Azure Dragon should be below. However, every time I wanted to go down to take a look, I would feel my mind tremble and I could not control myself. Once, I tried to force myself to get close, but I could only see a small part of it." Wei Zihong pondered for a moment, then took out a golden mirror from his sleeve and shone it downwards. In the blink of an eye, only an inky black cloud appeared in the mirror, and nothing else could be seen. When he wanted to take a closer look, he heard a cracking sound, and the mirror in his hand actually shattered into pieces and fell to the ground. Su Yihua was shocked. "Jinren, this?" Wei Zihong waved his hand and smiled. "It's fine. Seems like this dragon monarch's remains are here. Legend has it that when he was born, he was 10,000 feet long and there was a pearl under his chin called Qi Yen. It could break through all illusions and see through the netherworld. With this thing here, my treasure mirror can't shine on him." Floating astronomy. Chapter 975. After Wei Zihong finished speaking, Su Yihua seemed to recall the previous encounter and felt a lingering fear in her heart. She said, "Although this dragon monarch is dead, he still has some power left in his body. Even though spiritual master Wei's magic power is great, I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to extract his corpse." Wei Zihong said indifferently, "There's no need to rush. After I report to master, it won't be too late to hand it over to him." He only came to confirm if the true dragon's remains were really here. He didn't think about taking it out now. Not to mention the fact that the dragon corpse had other mysteries and was not easy to deal with. Even if they took it out, if someone coveted it at all costs, it would be difficult for them to safely deliver it to the mountain gate. It was better to leave it here and ignore it for now. He moved his feet and arrived before the stone tablet. He stared at it and said, "This is where the mechanism is located?" Su Yihua said, "That's right. There is a large formation here called the 7 Stars Great Shift Mysterious Array. It can move the Dragon Mansion to another place. This humble Taoist used it to escape that day. However, the 5 elders of the clan worked together to activate it. I'm afraid we don't have the strength to use it now." Wei Zihong stretched out his hand and pressed on the tablet. With this inspection, he felt an incomparably rich and pure spiritual vigor surging up. It was almost the same as what he felt at the bright nether lake. He couldn't help but be moved and said, "This is," Su Yihua said, "under this tablet, there is a strange item called the Heaven and Earth Fetus. I don't know where the dragon god got it from, but it can respond to the spiritual energy of the earth and heaven. Even though it can't compare to a spiritual cave, it is not inferior to a paradise. It is because of this item that the dragon god can travel freely in the 4 seas and 9 continents. If someone gets it, it will not be difficult for them to start a sect." Saying this, his expression was a bit complicated. "My clan previously plotted this dragon manor not only for the dragon god's remains, but also because of this item." Wei Zihong didn't comment on this. His expression was solemn as he thought to himself, "So there is such a treasure in this dragon manor. I really can't let others get it. I don't know when master will return, so why don't I write a letter first and report the situation here in detail? Then I'll set up restrictions around it and wait for the future." After thinking about it, he immediately took out a pen and paper, wrote a letter, and sent it out with his magic power. Then, he called Su Yihua and went outside the residence to set up the restriction formation flags. Although Su Yihua felt that this place was hidden and there was no need to do so, he didn't dare to disobey. The two of them spent about 20 days to set up more than 10 restrictive formations. He also linked the spiritual opportunity with the spiritual tablet in his residence. In this way, even if a few third-degree realm cultivators were to come here, they would not be able to break in a short period of time. Wei Zihong calculated the time and said, "In 2 days, it will be the first of the next month. Taoist Li will be preaching on the sea. Why don't we go and take a look and see what kind of person he is?" Suiwa had no objections. Thus, the two of them picked up their magic treasures and returned to the sea. He headed towards the Yanzhong continent that he had seen on his way here. At this time, the sky was just beginning to brighten, but along the way, it was very noisy. There were aquatic beasts coming and going everywhere, and those who had transformed into human form were all neatly dressed. Every time they met someone they knew, they would greet each other. If they were to put on a Taoist robe and a Taoist crown, it would make people think that they were attending a Taoist ritual. The two of them had high cultivation experience. Wherever they passed, the demons would respectfully make way for them, and no one dared to come up and ask about them. Suihua said in surprise, "This Taoist Li can manage a group of demon cultivators like a modest gentleman. That's a good method. This kind of behavior seems to be orthodox." Wei Zihong said, "I haven't seen this person, it's not good to make a judgment." When they arrived at the boundary, the two of them saw that the demons did not go to the island, but only gathered under the pillar cliff. They thought that was where the person was preaching, so they anchored the sea boat and waited for him to come out. When morning came, they heard the sound of a bell, and the waves on the sea parted. A giant shell slowly rose from the water, and a handsome young Taoist was sitting in it. He was wearing a lotus crown coat, and the sleeves of his robe were stretched out. There was a flag in his hand, and he was leaning on his shoulder. There were no strong clouds above his head, and it was actually his Dharmakaya. When the demons saw him, they all bowed to greet him, and called him Zhenren Li. Taoist Li unfurled the small flag in his hand, and black clouds spread out, covering the sea. Those who had taken human form all sat on the clouds happily, while those who were still in demon form all revealed looks of envy. Wei Zihong opened the divine eye on his forehead, and took a look. He could faintly see some demonic aura on him, and knew that he was also a different species who entered Tao. Taoist Li seemed to have sensed something and turned to look at him, but he smiled and nodded to him. This person first found a few demon cultivators, and asked them about their progress, and then gave them a few words of encouragement, and then began to speak. Wei Zihong listened carefully, and realized that although what he was preaching was not some profound Tao, it was undoubtedly orthodox Xianmen, and there were many details that were not skipped, but were clearly explained, and it was obvious that he had obtained the proper teachings. Taoist Li's Tao preaching was also not just boring, there were many allusions, and most of them were to guide people to do good. Every time, he would also demonstrate 1 or 2 magical Tao techniques, and the demon cultivators below listened attentively. This Tao preaching lasted for 4 hours, and when it was almost noon he raised his sleeves and waved, "Today's Tao preaching ends here, all of you can come again tomorrow to listen." The demons hurriedly bowed, but at this moment, a person jumped out. He was more than 10 feet tall, and he held a slender golden melon hammer in his hand. His left arm was bare, and his body was covered in a battle robe. He shouted, "Wait!" Taoist Li looked at him and said, "Fellow Taoist, what advice do you have?" That person said coldly, "Li Xiaomi, let me ask you, as a demon cultivator, you preach here, have you ever received an imperial edict from the imperial court?" Li Xiaomi smiled and said, "The imperial court? Are you talking about the demon lord of the North Sea? Although I have a demon body, I have my own master, and I am a person of Xianmen, but the demon court cannot control me." That person's expression changed, and he shouted, "How dare you? All demons in the world are my subjects, your words are treason." Li Xiaomi said, "According to what I know, ever since the demon lord of the North Sea was defeated by Donghua Qinsong School, he has been trapped in a corner for thousands of years, and his edict cannot reach half of the continent. He is no longer the lord of all the demon cultivators in the world, as you have said." After hearing this, the demon general was instantly enraged, but he could not refute it, and with a loud roar he rushed forward with his hammer. Li Xiaomi did not panic, and with a wave of the flag in his hand, countless clouds surged over and covered Yanzhong Island. In a short while, the two figures were also covered, and only the sound of magic power vibrating could be heard from time to time. Wei Zihong looked around and saw that even though the two of them were fighting, the demon cultivators below all had expressions of fear on their faces, but no one made a noise and no one moved. He thought to himself, this person is really capable to be able to educate these demons to such an extent. It is a pity that such a person is trapped here. As he thought of this, he suddenly thought of an idea. After a while, the sounds of fighting in the clouds gradually stopped and gradually dispersed. Li Xiaomi was still sitting in the same place, but the demon general was nowhere to be seen, and the outcome was obvious. Seeing this, Wei Zihong called out to Su Yaowa, stepped forward, and cupped his hands. Greetings, fellow Taoist Li. Li Xiaomi returned the greeting and said, just now, it is you two Taoists. Forgive me for not being polite, but it is rare to see cultivators from the Taoist sect on the sea. May I know where you two are from? Su Yaowa said, we came from the South Sea and we are going to Hanging Flute Island to visit a Taoist friend, but when we passed by this place, we saw tens of thousands of water demons coming here, and we heard about it, and we were curious, so we came to pay a visit. Li Xiaomi smiled and said, what I taught you is only some shallow Taoist techniques. It is not good enough to be seen in public. Please excuse me, fellow Taoists. Su Yaowa said, you are too modest, fellow Taoist. At this moment, Wei Zihong said, I saw fellow Taoists' way of doing things, opening altars and gathering soil to form continents. It seems like you want to establish a sect here? Li Xiaomi was also calm and he said, I can't hide it from you, fellow Taoist, but I do have the intention. Wei Zihong looked at the countless demon cultivators on the sea and he said, although this West Sea is big, in my opinion, it is not a good place to establish a sect. Li Xiaomi sighed and said, how can I not know? It's just that all the blessed lands in the world have been occupied, and the people of the same path in the world see us as different species, so we can only seek peace in this deserted place. West Sea was indeed not a good place, not to mention the lack of spiritual vigor. Even precious cultivation materials were extremely rare. Although the demons and spirits below all benefited from his teachings, it was only a rudimentary Taoist technique, and it did not require many external materials to cultivate, so it would be difficult to improve in the future. Even if he established a sect in the future, he could only take care of a few people. And to solve this problem, either to obtain a talisman that could gather spiritual vigor, or to occupy a spiritual land, but these two things were not easy to do. Wei Zihong said, but I know a place that is suitable for fellow Taoist. Li Xiaomi was instantly interested and he said, fellow Taoist, please guide me. Wei Zihong said, I wonder if fellow Taoist has heard of the Fengling Ocean? Li Xiaomi thought for a while and he said, I have heard of it. Wei Zihong said, although the spiritual vigor here is not enough, it is 100 times better than here, and it is even rarer. Among the thousands of sects in the sea realm, there is not a single person with your cultivation experience. If fellow Taoist goes there, you will be able to show off your skills. Li Xiaomi's heart was moved, and he stood up, and he bowed, and he said sincerely, thank you for telling me. The three of them talked for half a day, and they exchanged some cultivation experience, and Wei Zihong took his leave. On the way back, Su Yaowa asked, why do you want to lead this person to the Fengling Ocean? Do you want to accept this person as your sect too? Wei Zihong shook his head, and he did not explain. When he came this time, he saw that the Yuxiao school occupied a large area in the South State, and it had many disciples. On the surface, it seemed to be far more powerful than Qinsong. The reason was because it had already pacified the South Cliff State, and it was far away from the Donghua sects, so no one could stop it. Although he did not know about the discord between the sect and Qinsong school in the past, he felt that he could not let it grow so unscrupulously. Therefore, he wanted to put a few small thorns in its back to hold it back for a while. After half a day, the two returned to the Dragon House. Wei Zihong originally planned to return to the Fengling Ocean, but because Li Xiaomi was preaching nearby, he was afraid that the Sea clan would notice something was wrong here, so he decided to wait for a few more days before setting off again. He waited for another 2 months, and when he felt that the spirits had all dispersed, he set off to return. However, halfway there, he saw a spiritual light coming over, and he recognized it as a flying letter from the sect. He took it into his hand, opened it, and could not help but be overjoyed. Master has returned to Donghua, and has summoned us to meet him quickly. Floating astronomy. P.S. There will be more at night. Chapter 976. East Flower North Continent, upstream of the Chung River, on a hill, hundreds of demon warriors were carrying stones and carrying soil, building an altar. At the foot of the mountain, there were over 100 cultivators patrolling back and forth. All of them had solemn expressions, as if they were facing a great enemy. Several months ago, several elders of the Blood Soul sect suddenly led their disciples to attack this place. Because of this, after the sect was surrounded by the Chinsong school's spell altars, they did not move for a long time. As a result, the cultivators guarding this place were also caught off guard, and over 100 spell altars were destroyed. However, this spell altar set up on this golden sacrifice mountain was incomparably sturdy, and the cultivators inside guarded it with all their might. The cultivators from the various sects that the Chinsong school had set up in the surroundings also came to their aid. After a fierce battle, they were finally able to force them to retreat. However, most of the arrangements had been destroyed, and they had no choice but to rebuild it. A tall and slender woman in colorful clothes stood on the slope. Her face was filled with anxiety as she urged, "Faster, faster." There was a middle-aged Taoist nun standing beside her. When she saw her like this, she felt a bit helpless and said, "Disciple, you need to change your temper. I told you long ago that you need to be steady when doing things and remember to be impatient. There are several spiritual masters outside watching this place. Even if the Blood Soul sect came again, they would not be able to get away with it." The woman in colorful clothes said, "Master, Jinren Qin is strict with people. That's why I swore in front of him that I will rebuild the altar within 3 days. If I can't do it, I won't be able to bear the consequences if Jinren Qin questions me. How can I not be anxious?" The middle-aged Taoist nun said in a bad mood, "You brought this upon yourself. If you hadn't made a bet with Madame Zhang's Jr. and insisted on taking this place, how could you have gotten yourself into this mess? Sai, I've spoiled you too much." The woman in colorful clothes was not convinced. She said, "Master, perfected cultivator Chen said that as long as I make a great contribution, I can enter the Qin Grotto heaven to cultivate. Right now, everyone is fighting for merit. If this disciple takes a step back, then I will be left behind by my fellow disciples." The middle-aged Taoist nun shook her head and said in her heart, "This disciple of mine is thinking too simply. How could it be so easy to enter the abode of the Chen clan?" It was rumored that the few female disciples who had entered earlier were all female disciples. All of them have become Dao companions with members of the Chen clan. Thinking of this, she was secretly shocked. "That's not right. Could it be that Miss Chen has taken a fancy to my disciple? If that's the case, Master will definitely not be happy, but what if this is Master's idea?" She was the disciple of Luo Qingyu, and they were originally master and disciple. But after Immortal Yen became a member of the aristocratic family, she didn't know what to do. The multicolor-clothed woman saw that she was deep in thought. He asked curiously, "Master, what are you thinking about?" The middle-aged Taoist nun returned to her senses and sighed. "You're right. Since you're willing to improve yourself, how could I stop you? Don't worry, I've already made arrangements. I won't let you delay things." The multicolor-robed woman's eyes lit up. He asked anxiously, "Teacher, what are the arrangements?" The middle-aged Taoist nun smiled and said, "I've already invited Fangchen Courtyard's Chancellor Su over. This Taoist master is extremely proficient in the Tao of restrictive formations. Ask him to arrange the formation here first, then you can slowly build it. This way, you won't have to worry about any delays." The rainbow-clothed woman exclaimed in delight. "Thank you, Master. You're the one who has the greatest reputation." He even managed to invite Chancellor Su. The Taoist nun smiled bitterly and said, "Elder Su is a disciple of Taoist Master Zhu. I, your master, don't have such a big face. That's a favor from your grandmaster." The colorful-clothed woman said, "Then disciple will remember master's kindness." The two of us are all so pitiful. Then he ignored us. The middle-aged Taoist nun put on a straight face and said, "Don't talk nonsense. How can you slander Grandmaster behind his back?" The woman in multicolored clothes stuck out her tongue and didn't dare to say anything else. However, she couldn't conceal the joy on her face. However, this wait lasted for an entire day. When night fell, there was still no sign of the monastery head. The middle-aged Taoist nun also frowned. Just when she thought that the other party wouldn't come over, she saw a flying carriage with lights flying over the horizon. It approached from afar and slowly landed on the altar. The middle-aged Taoist nun said happily, "Monastery head Su has arrived." She hurriedly went to welcome him with her disciples. Monastery head Su got off the carriage and looked at the two of them. He chuckled and said, "Martial niece Fong must be anxious from waiting." The middle-aged Taoist nun hurriedly bowed and said, "I wouldn't dare. Uncle Master Su is busy with mundane matters." Martial niece was presumptuous this time. Monastery head Su smiled and said, "Wait for me to check the terrain first, then I'll help you set up the formation." After saying that, he soared into the sky and circled around the surroundings. Formation flags were thrown down one after another, all of which disappeared into the ground. After a long time, he landed. He made a hand seal and waved his horsetail whisk. In a split second, streaks of bright light shot up from the ground and twisted together. After flashing for a moment, they disappeared without a trace. Monastery head Su adjusted his breathing and smiled. "Martial niece Fong, the restrictive formation has been set up properly. Don't worry." The middle-aged Taoist nun bowed deeply and said, "Many thanks to Uncle Master Su." Monastery head Su chuckled. "When I was cultivating under Master Zhu, senior brother Luo often helped me. How can I sit back and watch when his disciple is in trouble? It's just that I haven't seen him much recently. If you see senior brother Luo, please send my regards." The middle-aged Taoist nun said, "Martial niece will definitely bring it." Monastery head Su looked at the sky and said, "I still have to make a trip to the northwest, so I won't stay any longer." The rainbow-clothed woman suddenly asked, "Uncle Master, are you going to the place guarded by that Zheng disciple?" Monastery head Su said in surprise, "Oh, you also know?" The rainbow-clothed woman snorted lightly and said, "The spell altar there isn't damaged at all. Why would there be a need for any restrictive formation?" Monastery head Su smiled. Although he was under Zhenren, he wasn't valued. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been sent to Fangchen courtyard. Thus, he didn't want to offend Zheng. Just as he was about to board the flying carriage, he saw a flying talisman flying over. When he saw it, his expression tightened. He caught it and opened it to take a look. He said solemnly, "Hall Master Du Zhen is coming to my courtyard to refine a treasure. I need to go back first." The middle-aged Taoist nun also shivered and said, "That can't be delayed. Martial uncle should quickly go back." Monastery Master Su made a sound of acknowledgement. In reality, the letter did not urge him, but he did not dare to be careless. At this moment, he did not even think about the matter of Zheng Shi's request. He did not even get on the flying carriage and flew straight back. After returning to Fangchen courtyard, he immediately sent out an edict and called back all the attendants and disciples in the courtyard. He ordered them to prepare all the necessary treasures and materials. If there was nothing important, they were not to go out. 3 days passed like this. A Taoist boy came on a flying ship and said that Hall Master Du Zhen was about to arrive. Su Yingtong hurriedly led over 100 disciples to welcome him. After waiting for about a moment, he saw a grand clear light descend from the sky. Astral energy flowed like a tide and filled the world. Su Yingtong bowed deeply and said, "Welcome, Hall Master Du Zhen." That clear light gradually faded and Zhang Yan stepped out. He swept his gaze and said, "Monastery head Su, you may dispense with the formalities. I've already stated my intentions in the letter. I believe you already know. It's just that this item is quite big, so I'll have to trouble you to put in more effort." 10 days ago, he had already returned from outer space. However, that broken pillar was left above extreme heaven with his mana. For the convenience of training in the future, he decided to first refine this item and then refine the earth-splitting heaven and earth leaf again. Su Yingtong said, Hall Master Du Zhen is too serious. We should put in effort for the sect. Zhang Yan nodded and raised his sleeve. His mana circulated. Everyone standing there felt dazed. When they looked again, they found that they were already in front of the heavenly furnace of earth fire. They realized that they were already in front of the earthly fire heavenly furnace. These disciples did not have high cultivations, so they could not help but be stunned when they saw such a method. Elder Su was the first to react and shouted, What are you all standing there for? Disciples, quickly return to your positions. Zhang Yan went to the spell altar and sat down. After a while, Su Yingtong also came up and bowed. Perfected one, the heavenly cauldron is ready. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. Because that broken pillar was too big, the Yuanian cultivators couldn't do anything to it. He could only do it himself. He raised his head and looked at the sky. After a while, a mighty force surged out from his body and activated this item. Not long after, there was a rumble and a mountain-like rock broke through the clouds and slowly fell towards the Dragon Abyss Lake. The rest of the grotto heavens in the sect felt something was wrong. But when they saw that he was controlling it with his mana, they calmed down and didn't probe further. When the disciples of the Fangchun courtyard saw the incomparably large boulder pressing down on them, they felt uneasy even though they knew that it couldn't hurt them. Some of them even had the thought of withdrawing and fleeing. Su Yingtong shouted, Disciples, guard your positions and don't have any distracting thoughts. He usually had a lot of prestige. With this shout, the disciples didn't dare to move. Half a day later, the broken pillars slowly fell into the heavenly cauldron under everyone's gaze. Only then did Zhang Yan slowly retract his mana. The next thing he needed to do was to draw down the flames of the earth and refine it repeatedly, causing all the impurities within it to be completely eliminated, causing it to be completely transparent from inside out. After that, he would be able to infuse precious materials into it, and he would be able to construct a palace and place all sorts of restrictions within it. However, the final step of refining his magic energy would still require him to do it himself. Headmaster Su, I will come back in 2 years. You all need to look after it carefully. Su Yingtong said, We will guard carefully and don't dare to slack off. Zhang Yan nodded and asked, Is Taoist Yu still cultivating in the courtyard? Su Yingtong said, Yes. After Taoist Yu was relieved of his position, he cultivated in the blessed land. Right now, he is sitting and observing. Do you want me to call him out to greet you? Zhang Yan said, No need. When I was in charge of suppressing the demon cave, Taoist Yu also put in a lot of effort. After he comes out, you can pass me a decree. I will promote him to be a duty elder of the Duzhen Hall. In the future, he can cultivate there. When Su Yingtong heard this, he felt his heart warm up. He thought to himself, I thought Taoist Yu didn't have any foundation in the sect. I didn't expect him to be connected to the Duzhen Hall master. If I work hard, I might be able to go to the Duzhen Hall to cultivate. Zhang Yan made arrangements here and returned to the Duzhen Hall. Before he entered the Xuanzi realm, Zhang Chan came to report, Master, Taoist Wei has returned to the hall and is waiting outside. Zhang Yan said with a smile, Zihong is back. Quickly call him in. Zhang Chan complied and left. After a while, Wei Zihong entered the hall and saw Zhang Yan sitting in the hall. He hurriedly came in and kowtowed, saying, Disciple Wei Zihong greets Master. Zhang Yan said with a smile, Get up. Thank you, Master. Wei Zihong bowed again and got up. Zhang Yan asked, Did you get the sect master to go out this time? Wei Zihong nodded and said, Yes. Disciple was lucky and didn't disappoint. I found the location of the true Dragon Hall and obtained a small realm. Zhang Yan waved his hand and said, This matter is not urgent. We can talk about it later. But that Zhou Ruiying dared to make things difficult for you. I have to ask. Floating astronomy. Chapter 977. Zhang Yan didn't like Zhou Ruiying bullying the weak and making things difficult for his own disciple. But with his status, he naturally wouldn't go so far as to make a big fuss over this matter and invite a fight. Xian Men and the Devil's Doctrine were fighting at the moment. Yu Xiao was still preparing for the upcoming battle of the Devil's Cave. If he went up to cause trouble, it would be inappropriate for him to become the subject of gossip. However, he could not let this matter go. He had to teach Yu Xiao a lesson. He changed his mind and asked, "Are there any highly skilled cultivators among the Chan Palace disciples you took in Fengling Ocean?" Wei Zihong shook his head and said, "Disciple only found out from Chan Palace Lord Shaoshan that after Master Lingya defeated that Reverend Xiao Zhu 2,000 years ago, although he didn't kill all the cultivators in Fengling Ocean, he was still on guard against them. Any cultivators who entered the third-degree realm would definitely try to get rid of them." Zhang Yan said, "You previously mentioned that there are 3 major sects in Fengling Ocean and the rest are under them. So even if there are third-degree cultivators, they should be from one of these 3 sections." Wei Zihong said, "That is indeed the case. According to disciples' observation, Chan Palace and Yu Xiao have a deep grudge, but they are limited by their own abilities and dare not speak up. Even if some cultivators are talented, but because of this matter, they still don't dare to take a step forward." Zhang Yan nodded slightly and thought, "In this case, my plan is feasible." He said slowly, "After you return to Fengling Ocean, you can issue an edict saying that no matter where your Yaoyin governs or where the lower sects are located, Yu Xiao disciples are not allowed to take a step in, otherwise they will be killed on the spot." Wei Zihong's heart moved. With his status, if he did this in Fengling Ocean, it was hard to say for small sects, but those who were interested in the path of Tao would most likely come to seek protection. But thinking again, he seemed to feel that the intention was not that simple, so he said, "Forgive disciple for making wild guesses. Master, are you going to support the cultivators here to restrict Yu Xiao?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I do have the same intention, but this will only add some trouble for him at most. If we are talking about restraining Yu Xiao, it is far from enough. What he wants is to take over the entire Fengling Ocean. However, it is still not enough. Unless a heavenly passage can be produced here, needing my Qinsong's support, it won't be able to hold on for long." Wei Zihong couldn't agree more. In the face of a giant like Yu Xiao school, so what if another grotto heaven appeared in Fengling Ocean? Once Yu Xiao got serious, it would be difficult for him to escape defeat. However, if he was a disciple of the Yaoyin sect, then he would have Zhang Yan, the Duzhen sect's Duzhen Hall master, behind him. With the entire Qinsong school as his backup, he was no longer a rootless person. Yu Xiao would not dare to act rashly. Zhang Yan looked down and said, "However, this person is not you. He must come from the Fengling Ocean. If he is a descendant of Xiao Zhu, that would be even better." Wei Zihong nodded to show that he understood. Although he was the Yaoyin sect leader, although he was the sect master of the Yaoyin sect, everyone knew that he was Zhang Yan's disciple. Not to mention whether he could become a heavenly passage in the future, even if he really succeeded, he would not be stationed in Qinsong and would go to the Fengling Ocean instead. That would be telling the whole world that the 2 sects were not on good terms. However, if this person came from Xiao Zhu's lineage, he would be an enemy of Yu Xiao in the future. That would also be avenging the sect, but it would stand on the side of righteousness. He thought about it carefully and said, "This time when I went to the dragon residence, I saw a person on the West Sea. Although he was a demon, his cultivation base and character were good. He also inherited the orthodox arts of the Xian Men and had the intention to establish a sect. Because there was no spiritual opportunity in the West Sea, I wanted to lead him to the Fengling Ocean to cultivate. However, this person was not from Xiao Zhu's lineage." Zhang Yan became interested and said, "Can you tell me about this person in detail?" Wei Zihong then told Zhang Yan about Li Xiaomi. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I met this person when I went to the Western continent in the past, and I also know his background. I gave him some advice back then, and from what you've told me, it's clear that he heard it. This person is a promising talent, and it's not impossible to imagine that he's not Xiao Zhu's successor. In your previous letter, you mentioned that there are many pill jades hidden in that small world. However, there is a talisman on them, stating that the person who wants to take it must make a promise and return to the southern cliff to re-establish the sect in the future. Is that true? Wei Zihong said, that is true. Because of this, I dare not take it. In the small world, he and the people of Chan Palace had searched everywhere in order to find the location of the prohibition mechanism. Because of this, they found the hiding place of the pill jades. However, most of them were inferior jades and there were not many superior jades. However, with the suppression of the talisman, no one dared to touch them. At this point, he raised his head and said, Master, do you want Li Xiaomi to accept this karma? Zhang Yan smiled and said, if he dares to accept it, so what if I give it to him? After you go back, you can talk to this person. If he is willing, you can bring him to see me and I will explain it to him. With his mana, it was not difficult to break the talisman, but most of the pill jades would be damaged. Instead of that, it was better to help the person who was willing to accept the karma. Wei Zihong bowed and said, Disciple understands. After a pause, he said, Disciple has one more thing to report. That Suiwa has been brought to the mountain gate by Disciple and is still outside the mountain gate. I don't know how to deal with him. Master, please tell me. Zhang Yan said, You don't have to care about this matter anymore. Later, I will order the Zhengqing courtyard to detain him. When the Long family returns to the mountain gate, we will deal with him together. Wei Zihong bowed and did not say anything else. At this time, Zhang Yan stood up and said, This time you are on the order of the sect leader. Since you are here, follow me to see the sect leader. After saying that, he waved his sleeve and brought Wei Zihong out of the Duzhen Hall like a breeze. In a blink of an eye, they were outside the Shangji Hall and said, Is the sect leader Zhenren here? Duzhen Hall's Zhang Yan is here to see you. After a while, a Taoist child came out and said, The sect leader invites Duzhen Hall master to enter the hall. Zhang Yan ordered Wei Zihong to wait outside while he went into the hall. When he arrived in front of the jade platform, he bowed and said, Greetings to the sect leader Zhenren. Sect leader Qin raised his hand and gestured to him. He smiled and said, Duzhen Hall master, please come closer and take a seat. Zhang Yan bowed again and went up the jade platform. He sat down on the praying mat. Sect leader Qin looked at him and said, Duzhen Hall master's cultivation has improved after going beyond the sky. Zhang Yan said, The calamity is coming. For the sect's big plan, I don't dare to be careless. Sect leader Qin nodded and said, Duzhen Hall master's disciple Wei Zihong is outside. Has he found the Long family's whereabouts? Zhang Yan said, I was about to report it to the sect leader. In a few words, he told him about the Long family and the small world. Then, he told him about his plan just now. In the end, he said, there are still hundreds of years before the calamity. If Yu Xiao is invincible, he will definitely pay attention to other places. I have thought about supporting a family. I want to place a child on the side to divide their strength and confuse their mind. This will make it easier for our Qinsong school to lay out our plans. It's just that we couldn't find a chance before. This time, Yu Xiao bullied my disciple. It's a good time to do this. Sect leader Qin nodded slowly and said, This plan is feasible. Zhang Yan smiled and said, But that small world should be given to him as a foundation. Sect leader Qin also smiled and said, Our Qinsong school doesn't lack a small world. Since we need someone to bear its karma, we don't have to be greedy to get our hands on it. Zhang Yan said, There's one more thing. When my disciple was trapped in the small world, Mount Lishan sent a personal disciple here. It seemed that he wanted to help. After that, they even invited him to the mountain gate as a guest. Based on his words and deeds, he seemed to want to express his goodwill. Sect leader Qin thought deeply for a while and said, Back then, Xia sect couldn't find a Xiang cultivator, so there was no one guarding the spirit cave. At that time, Yuanyang and Taihao sects all thought that this cave should be removed and Donghua could maintain the structure of the 9 sections. Among our 3 sects, Shaoqing didn't want to get involved in this matter and didn't care about it. Later on, our Qinsong and Yuxiao worked together to suppress the other sections. We also supported Yuling from the lower sect of Shihe and helped her to obtain the spirit cave and establish Mount Lishan. From this point of view, our 2 sects have been kind to her. As for where this person will stand, we can't just rely on what she did at the moment. We need to wait and see. Zhang Yan smiled and said, even though the great calamity is approaching, I'm afraid that it won't easily reveal its true intentions until the final moment. Disciple thinks that there's no harm in using this opportunity to force it. Zhenren Yuling's mana was profound and she was close to the realm of ascension. It could be said that she alone could support a sect. Such a person should naturally be pulled to their side. Sect leader Qin nodded and said, if Hall Master Du Jin has the confidence, you can act at your own discretion. After the two of them discussed for a long time, they decided on various plans. Then, they ordered a Taoist child to go out and call Wei Zihong in. Wei Zihong entered the inner room and glanced over. His teacher and sect leader Qin were sitting on the jade platform. He did not dare to look too much and hurriedly lowered his head, bowed and kowtowed. Zhang Yan stretched out his hand and a talisman condensed. He flicked his finger and said, later, go to the sea and retrieve the dragon manor. This talisman can help you transport the dragon manor's mechanism back to our Qinsong mountain. Wei Zihong stretched out his hand to receive it and said, disciple obeys. Sect leader Qin smiled and waved his horsetail whisk. Similarly, a talisman came down and said, I will also give you a talisman. Take it with you when you go. If you are in danger, you can activate this talisman. Wei Zihong received the talisman and bowed to thank him. He said, thank you, sect leader Zhenren, for giving me the talisman. At this moment, Zhang Yan's lips moved and he transmitted a few words to Wei Zihong. When Wei Zihong heard this, he nodded his head repeatedly. Not long later, he heard a chime beside his ear and knew that he could not stay any longer. He bowed again and left the hall. After leaving the great pool of Dragon Abyss, he packed up a little and left the mountain gate. He turned into a beam of light and went straight to the West Sea. Other than retrieving the Dragon Manor, he also had to convince Li Xiaomi to go to the Fengling Ocean. He was quite confident about this. That person did not have a blessed land for cultivation and did not have the support of his fellow disciples. Even if he had the proper mental cultivation method, he would not be able to go far. However, if he had the elixir jade in the small world and the blessed land of cultivation in this world, it would be very different. It could be said that he would have the foundation to establish a sect in the blink of an eye. Even if he was in her shoes, he would not be able to refuse such benefits. This time, he traveled on land. After traveling for more than 10 days, he saw that the mountain gate of Mount Li was not far away. He thought about the words that Zhang Yan had said to him before he left. He pondered for a moment on the cloud and landed outside the formation of the mountain gate. He said in a clear voice, Zhenren Fang, Yaoyin's Wei Zihong is here to pay a visit. Chapter 978. As soon as Wei Zihong's voice fell, he saw a cool breeze coming from high up in the sky. Without a sound, a tall decorated archway rose from the flat ground. The archway was decorated with colorful jade. It was beautifully painted and decorated with silk ribbons and beads. It was exquisite beyond compare. After a while, two ladies in luxurious robes came out, each holding a jade bottle and incense sticks. They bowed to him and stood to his left and right. Wei Zihong could tell that this decorated archway was just a small path in the formation. However, he also knew that even though he was the sect leader of Yaoyin sect, he was not the Taoist master of heavenly abode. It was not to the extent that the other party would open the main door to welcome him. Looking in from the archway, he saw that the interior was covered by fog. It was hazy and not very clear. If he opened the divine eye on his forehead, it would not be hard to tell if it was real or not. However, he was here as a guest, and doing so would be offensive, so he did not do anything. After a while, flowers and leaves floated out from inside. In a flash, the fragrance filled the air. Fang Rujia, wearing pearls and jade on her forehead, was dressed in a close-fitting dress. Her waist was slender, her belt covered her knees, and her long skirt dragged the ground. She walked out slowly and greeted, "I didn't know that Taoist Master Wei would come to visit. My daughter did not go out to welcome you." Wei Zihong raised his hand to return the greeting. "I took the liberty to visit. I hope I did not disturb fellow Taoist Fang's cultivation." Feng Rujia smiled and said, "Sect leader Wei is too serious. It's just that you came a few days later than I expected." Wei Zihong said, "I am burdened with mundane affairs, it is difficult for me to act on my own." Feng Rujia smiled and moved half her body to the side. "The outside is not a place to receive guests, please follow my daughter inside." Wei Zihong thanked her, and a cloud appeared under his feet as he followed her into the decorated archway. When he was inside, he looked around and saw that he was in an exquisite courtyard. There were stone mountains, water pavilions, flowers and trees, everything was there. Just 1,000 feet away, there was a clear pond with several acres of lotus flowers. It was as if they were welcoming guests, their petals and leaves spread out, swaying gently with the waves. At this moment, he heard laughter and looked towards the direction of the sound. Under a few peach blossom trees, swings swayed gently and the shadows of butterflies fluttered. A few women in colorful clothes sat together, all of them quiet and elegant, playing the flute and zither. Along with the music, birds perched on the branches, singing along with it. There were even red-crowned cranes dancing gracefully and elegantly. It could be said that they were beautiful and beautiful, with birds and flowers looming over them. When the girls sensed the arrival of guests, they giggled and dispersed, hiding behind the flowering shrubs. Some of the more daring ones even went to the treetops. He was even quietly sizing him up. Feng Rojia also walked in and smiled. "These are all disciples who have just entered the sect just now. There are no rules, please don't take offense." Wei Zihong thought to himself, "Here I don't see the futon, the cauldron, the ancient cauldron, the green smoke, but I see the fragrant clothes, the beautiful hundreds of flowers, but it's too much of a waste of spirit. It is not a place for us cultivators to stay for long." The two of them walked another 100 or so steps before Feng Rujia raised her sleeve and pointed at a small boat moored by the side of the pond. "Sect leader Wei, please come this way." Wei Zihong nodded and climbed up with her. Feng Rujia's fingers formed a spell, and the small boat under her feet swayed slightly, brushing against the waves and flying out like an arrow. Tens of breaths later, they stopped in front of an embroidered building. A girl who looked to be 17 or 18 years old with a busta figure came up and looked curiously at Wei Zihong. She said, "Senior Sister Feng, which sect does this Taoist come from?" Feng Rujia said, "This is sect leader Wei of the Yaoying clan." The girl was slightly shocked and hurriedly moved to the side. She lowered her head and said, "So it is Qinsong Zhenren Zhang's disciple, I have been rude." Feng Rujia said, "This is Zhao Nyangzi on duty. Her ancestor came from the 9 cities of Qinsong school." Wei Zihong couldn't help but size up the girl. He had heard a little about what happened in Li Mountain sect in the past. He also knew about this story. After Zhenren Yuling became the leader of Shiha sect, his foundation was not stable. Therefore, he borrowed many people from Yuxiao sect and Qinsong sect to be his disciples. The two sects were naturally willing to do such a thing. However, Yuxiao school had done a little bit of this. They even sent a few Yuanian cultivators over to be their offerings. However, Zhenren Yuling didn't have the strength to reject them back then. If he hadn't cultivated to the Grotto Heaven realm later on, no one would know who was the master and who was the guest. On the other hand, Qinsong school sent a lot of people from the 9 cities. Many of Zhenren Yuling's disciples were of this origin. However, since she abandoned Shiha orthodoxy and established Li Mountain sect, this group of people was gradually less heard of. The two girls invited Wei Zihong to sit in the hall. They didn't talk much when a letter flew over. Feng Rujia excused herself and went behind the screen. Zhao Nyangzi sat beside her and asked with a smile, "Sect leader Wei, how is the scenery in our sect on the way here?" Wei Zihong's heart wasn't here, so he only gave a few words of praise. Zhao Nyangzi took it seriously and said excitedly, "These few small sceneries can't be compared to the Path of 100 Flowers. It was personally arranged by the founding master. It can be said to be a scenery with every step. Especially the moonplate pearl, shameful dress, willow-cutting leaves, these few are even more marvelous. If Zhenren Wei is interested, I can bring Zhenren there to take a look." At this time, Feng Rujia came out again. Seeing Zhao Nyangzi speaking, Wei Zihong smiled, but only responded with a few words. She smiled and gave Zhao Nyangzi a look. Seeing this, Zhao Nyangzi found an excuse and left. Feng Rujia returned to her seat and said apologetically, "Sect leader Wei, please forgive me. I was ordered to invite Jinren here as a guest. Unfortunately, the Devil's Cave is about to appear and my master is checking the spiritual opportunity. I'm afraid you will have to wait for a few days before you can see her." Wei Zihong didn't mind. No matter what, Li Mountain sect was one of the 10 sects of Xianmen. He didn't expect to see Jinren Yuling the moment he came. He only said, "I came to visit along the way and also to thank you for your help last time. I don't dare to disturb your sect leader." Feng Rujia sighed. Sect leader Wei is too polite. Last time, Rujia came very late and couldn't help you much. Wei Zihong said half-jokingly, "Now there is something I wonder if you can help me with?" Feng Rujia asked, "What is it?" Wei Zihong said, "I have an important matter to attend to in the West Sea. I only left the Chan Palace cultivators to guard that small world. I'm afraid it will be invaded by Yu Xiao, so I would like to ask you to protect it. Is that possible?" Feng Rujia looked over and said, "Since Taoist Wei has asked, Rujia will naturally help." Wei Zihong's expression was normal, but he was shocked inside. He thought that even if she agreed, she would ask for something. At the very least, she would make things difficult. He didn't expect her to agree so easily. This was a little unexpected. Feng Rujia seemed to see the doubt in his heart and smiled lightly. Sect leader Wei probably doesn't know, but the founder of Chan Palace once listened to Dao from the same sect as my master. Speaking of which, they are of the same lineage. Wei Zihong was stunned and thought to himself, "Previously when I saw Chan Palace's technique, it does have some similarities with your sect. However, I thought it was just a coincidence, so I didn't ask. I didn't expect there to be such a connection." However, he didn't care if the two were connected. As long as Li Mountain sect was willing to fight against Yu Xiao together, it would be considered a success. Because things were going smoothly, he wasn't in a hurry to leave. He stayed in Li Mountain sect for 3 days, and under Feng Rujia's recommendation, he visited a few important figures in the sect. However, he still didn't see Jinren Yuling appear. He knew that he wouldn't be able to see him this time, so he bid farewell and left. After leaving Li Mountain sect, he flew west. In half a month, he passed 2 continents and arrived at the Yanzhong continent. He landed on the cloud. And called out a few times. The restrictions on the island were activated. Li Xiaomi held a spell flag and rowed a boat out. After exchanging a few pleasantries, he welcomed him in. When they sat down in the hall, Li Xiaomi said, "It hasn't been long since we parted. Is Taoist looking for something?" Wei Zihong said, "I am indeed here for something." He didn't beat around the bush and directly stated his intentions. Finally, he said, "Taoist Li, if you agree to this matter, you will have to make your Yanzhong branch my Yaoyin lower sect. If you aren't willing, I naturally won't force you." When Li Xiaomi heard this, his expression was filled with excitement. An excited expression appeared on his face, but he immediately suppressed the rising and falling emotions in his heart and began to ponder carefully. Although he was a Xianmen disciple, he didn't have the support of his fellow sect members. He was actually very different from a wandering cultivator. After planning for hundreds of years, he finally had a foothold on the ocean. Even so, it wasn't a good place to start a sect. Thus, he knew the importance of a sect's foundation more than normal people. Now that he heard that there was a small world that he could start from, and there was even a legendary pill jade that was beneficial for cultivation, he was really tempted. The risk here was nothing more than being enemies with Yu Xiao. Perhaps it was extremely dangerous, but compared to forming a grotto heaven, it was nothing. Taoist grotto heaven lived to 3,000 years and had the ability to flatten mountains and move continents. Once he succeeded, he would be able to rule over an area and no one would dare to bully him. Even people of the same generation wouldn't easily come and pick a fight with him. As for Jinren Xiaozhu of Fengling Ocean, if he didn't insist on killing his way to the East Hua continent, Yu Xiao wouldn't take the initiative to touch him. It was more likely that he would try to appease him. After thinking about it for a while, He had already considered the pros and cons. He immediately left the table, straightened his robe and solemnly said, I, Li Xiaomi, am willing to be the vanguard and share the burden of the sect. Wei Zihong also stood up and said in a deep voice, Jinren Li, have you thought it through? Li Xiaomi smiled and said, there are still some chores in the sect that need to be dealt with. After that, I will go with the sect leader to pay a visit to Zhang Shangzhen. When Wei Zihong heard this, he also made up his mind. He nodded and said, okay, I'll wait for you here. Li Xiaomi excused herself and retreated. This time, he couldn't be alone. Among the disciples who had listened to the Tao on the Sea, there were a few who had outstanding qualifications, so he wanted to bring them along. As for the rest, he could only dismiss them first and try to find them when they had a firm foothold in the future. In less than half a day, he waited for the matters of the disciples to be settled. Then he came to an empty valley behind the mountain, pushed aside the long grass, and came to a stone statue. He knelt down respectfully and said, Sir, I have received the help of a noble person and hope to re-establish the sect. The day when you are free is not far away. The stone statue didn't answer, but just shook gently a few times. Li Xiaomi kowtowed a few more times and came out. First, he went to the secret pavilion and returned the Dharmakaya to his physical body. Then, he returned to the main hall and said, Everything is settled. It's time for me to leave. Wei Zihong got up and said, When I go back this time, I can use something. I don't have to travel thousands of mountains and rivers anymore. Jinren Li, come with me. Li Xiaomi said yes. Wei Zihong stepped out of the hall, pulled up his body, and flew to the sea in a stream of escape light. Li Xiaomi also followed. The dragon mansion was not far from the island, so the two of them arrived there in a short time. Wei Zihong swam down first and followed the previous path into the dragon mansion. However, as soon as Li Xiaomi arrived, his face became extremely pale. Wei Zihong asked in surprise, What's wrong with you, Jinren Li? Li Xiaomi wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and said, I don't know why, but as soon as I arrived here, I felt my mind was in a mess and I couldn't control myself. Wei Zihong thought for a moment and guessed that it was because of the Dragon King's corpse, so he said, Jinren, please be patient. He walked to the front of the pivot stone tablet, took out the talisman given by Zhang Yan, and put it on it. At this moment, the ground under his feet shook, and there was a loud bang under the deep sea. Countless dust, mud, and seawater surged up, and then the entire dragon mansion suddenly emitted a white light and disappeared without a trace. Floating astronomy. P.S. There's only one update today, but there will be more tomorrow. Chapter 979. P.S. I want to hear more of your voices and receive more of your suggestions. Search for the official WeChat account, Kdred, and add me to give more support to battle for the Great Path. In front of the Dark Azure Sect's mountain gate, within a radius of 1,000 miles, the mountains all around were producing the sound of drums. At this time, the sky was suddenly filled with rays of light, scattered like silk ribbons. In a flash, it seemed like it was cut into pieces, scattering like cotton. After wandering for several tens of breaths, the weather suddenly changed, dark clouds covered the sky, thunder and lightning suddenly appeared, and heavy rain poured down. At this moment, there was a loud noise that shook the heavens. A large gap appeared in the sky wall, as if a great river had burst its banks. An immeasurable amount of water rushed out from within, and then a palace followed closely behind, breaking through the water curtain, exploding into tens of thousands of water droplets. It rushed out with a loud bang, and then heavily chiseled into the surging waves lake in the middle of the three pools. Instantly, 100 feet high tide was set off, flooding the surrounding shores. Ever since the calamity began, the disciples of the Dark Azure sect had been entangled with the Devil sect for hundreds of years. The outside of the Great Dragon Lake pool was also covered with altars and restrictions, and there were people patrolling everywhere. Such a huge commotion was detected by all of them, and all of them turned into streaks of light and rushed over. For a moment, hundreds of streaks of light could be seen coming from all directions. However, before they could get close, They were blocked by the surging wind around them. The lights swayed and they all retreated, but they couldn't break in at all. The master of the surging waves lake was Miao Kuan. Because he was sect leader Qin's disciple in name, he had occupied such a huge area all these years and had taken in many disciples. When he sensed that something had happened in his territory, he also used his mana and flew out. When he reached the outside, he saw a bronze palace that was shaped like a tall pillar. Half of it was submerged in the water, and the other half reached the clouds. There were countless dragon carvings on it, and each of them looked angry, dancing and wagging their tails. When the heavenly sun shone, it moved with the light as if it could twist its body and fly into the blue sky at any time. He couldn't help but be shocked. True dragon manner? He thought for a moment, then grabbed a disciple and said loudly, "Quickly report to the sect. Just say that the true dragon manor that was separated several hundred years ago has now returned to the mountain gate." Finished speaking, he pushed his hand forward, stirring up a gust of strong wind, and sent him in the direction of the mountain gate. In the blink of an eye, the disciple had entered the great swamp of the dragon abyss. He had only cultivated for a short period of time, so he didn't know what was going on. Miao Kuan's words came out of nowhere, and he didn't know where to report it. He could only fly towards the Spiritual Machine Institute that he was most familiar with. At this moment, Wei Zihong was standing in the same place, but his eyes were closed, and he was motionless. He didn't expect that this trip to the Dragon Mansion would cause the mana in his body to surge and his aura to become unstable. He could only adjust his breathing in the same place. After a while, he opened his eyes, turned around, and was about to come out. When he arrived at the entrance, he discovered that it was actually blocked by a layer of restriction light. He used his mana to push, but the divine light did not budge. He felt that it was not something he could break, so he opened his divine eyes and looked outside the damaged stone door. Seeing that the surrounding scenery was exceptionally familiar, he knew that he had successfully returned to the front gate of the Qinsong school. His heart was at ease and he retreated. At this moment, he saw Li Xiaomi sitting cross-legged on the ground, and his body trembled slightly. There was still sweat on his temples, and it could be seen that it was unusually hard to endure. He said, "Jinren Li, this dragon mansion seems to have triggered some spiritual opportunity. You and I can't get out for a while, but the sect should already know that we are back. You should bear with it for a little longer." As soon as Li Xiaomi arrived, he felt that the pressure had multiplied. He could no longer speak, and could only force himself to nod. Right at the moment the dragon manor appeared, Zhang Yan, who was sitting in the true purification hall, had already sensed it. He raised his sleeve and pointed at the fixed earth plate. A strand of light and smoke rose up, and in the blink of an eye, the scenery outside appeared before his eyes. He looked up and saw that the dragon mansion was covered by a ray of spiritual light. It was very dazzling. He knew that the heaven and earth fetus that was hidden here was not restrained by the restrictive spell. Moreover, it was a place where spiritual vigor flourished. Therefore, the original restrictive spell was activated again. Although it was not enough, it was not something that an ordinary disciple could break. He pondered for a while, then raised his hand to form a spell and condensed a talisman. With a flick of his finger, a golden light flew out of the hall door and turned into a rainbow above the floating heavenly palace. It directly hit the layer of spiritual light, like a golden pill hitting glass. With a clear sound, it was smashed. Inside, Wei Zihong noticed that the way out had been opened. Afraid that there would be more changes, he quickly shouted, "Jinren Li, get out quickly." As he spoke, he jumped out. When Li Xiaomi heard the call, his body struggled as if he had gotten rid of some restraints. His body also turned into a flowing rainbow and flew out. Once outside, in just a moment his original decadence disappeared and he became energetic again. Looking back at the palace, he could not help but feel a lingering fear. Miao Kuan saw two people coming out of the dragon mansion. He took a closer look and recognized Wei Zihong. He said a few words to the surrounding disciples and drove them away. He flew up on a cloud and said with a smile, "I was wondering who it was. So it's Marshal Nephew Wei. Did you bring this dragon mansion back? This is a great merit. Wei Zihong cupped his hands and said, Jinren Miao is too polite. This time, I am also acting on the orders of my master. There is no merit. After the two of them chatted for a while, a golden boat came from the sky and stopped in front of them. The boy walked to the bow of the boat and said, Jinren Wei, master has ordered you to meet Jinren Li in the hall. Wei Zihong cupped his hands and said, Thank you for passing the message. Miao Kuan smiled and said, Temple Master Zhang has summoned you. Martial nephew, don't delay. Go quickly. Wei Zihong cupped his hands and took Li Xiaomi to the sky. When they arrived at the floating heavenly palace, a spiritual light came down and led the two of them up. When they arrived outside the Duzhen Hall, Wei Zihong was first called in after being reported. Li Xiaomi waited outside for a long time before a boy came out and said, Jinren Li is summoning you into the hall. He thanked the boy and followed him inside. They went around a bright jade wall and came to an empty hall. The place was filled with smoke and surrounded by the air. As they walked, it was as if they were walking in the clouds. After more than 100 steps, a row of horizontal stairs appeared in front of them. In the middle of the stairs was a crane-necked copper furnace with smoke curling up. There were 3 steps to go up. The boy stood still and said, Jinren, just go up. Li Xiaomi thanked him, tidied up his robe and walked up the stairs. Not long after he reached the top. He looked up and saw a handsome Taoist sitting on a jade platform 1,000 feet away. Xian Qi was rising from his back, and spiritual lights surrounded him. There were 2 Taoist boys on each side, and Wei Zihong stood below. He recognized them as the Donghua cultivator who had once subdued him on the West Sea. After just a few glances, he suddenly felt his mind shake. It was somewhat similar to what he had experienced in the Dragon Mansion. He couldn't help but be shocked and didn't dare to look anymore. He quickly lowered his head and bowed, saying, Overseas cultivator Li Xiaomi greets Zhang Shangzhen. Zhang Yan smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Li, it has been more than 200 years since we last met. According to Zihong, you have always been cultivating in the West Sea. It is not easy for you to improve your cultivation to this level in that desolate place. Li Xiaomi sighed and said with emotion, Just now, I came out of the mountain after my technique was completed. I always thought that with my cultivation, there was no place in the world that I couldn't go. Even if it was to start a sect, it would not be difficult. Later, I was lucky enough to meet Jinren and was taught a lesson. Just now, I know the immensity of heaven and earth. All these years, I haven't slacked off for even a moment. I painstakingly cultivated and was lucky enough to have this insignificant cultivation. Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said, You should also know that at this stage of cultivation, if you go further, you will need to borrow a lot of external forces. It is not something that can be achieved by relying on one's mind. Li Xiaomi said, Yes. This time, Jinren Wei has specially ordered Jinren Wei to come and give me some advice. I am very grateful for this. Zhang Yan said, Master Zihong has already told you about the pros and cons of this matter. Since you have come on orders, you must have already made up your mind. I don't need to waste any more words with you. Your school's seal has already been prepared. Take it. He raised his hand and a boy came down the steps with a jade plate. On it were robes, talismans, and jade seals. Wei Zihong said, Jinren Li, you only need to make a dharma contract here. That small world will be under your control, and all the things in it will also be under your control. Li Xiaomi calmed his mind and took down the contract. After carefully reading it, he swore to sign the contract on the spot, put away the robes and seals, and then bowed to thank him. Zhang Yan nodded with a smile and said, Sect Leader Li, you may rise. When Li Xiaomi heard this call, he suddenly fell into a trance. Then, his body became lighter, as if a heavy burden on his heart had been lifted. He suddenly understood. Although he hadn't really established a sect yet, from this moment on, the foundation had been formed, the general trend had been established, and he had been recognized by the big sections. From this moment on, the Taoist orthodoxy could be considered to have re-established itself in this world. He couldn't help but feel excited. However, in his joy, he thought, I wonder if Sir is free? Zhang Yan could see that he was not in the right mind and knew the reason. He smiled and said, "When we go back, you can say hello to Mr. Shi for me." Li Xiaomi hurriedly said, "I will definitely bring it to him." At this time, a boy walked to his side, bowed, and said, "Sect leader Li, please come this way." Li Xiaomi also knew that it was time to leave. He bowed to the jade platform again and followed the boy out of the hall. After he left, Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and the Xian Qi behind him spread out, slowly rising to the top of the sky. Then, the yellow smoke from all directions gathered, and in an instant, it turned into a giant hand. It grabbed the true dragon mansion and lifted it up from the surging waves lake. After a long time, it used its Dharma power to fix it in place. He shook his sleeves and stood up on the jade platform. A clear light shot out from his feet and landed on the dragon manor like a bridge. He said, "Disciple, follow me." Wei Zihong followed. The master and disciples' Taoist robes fluttered as they followed the light. After a while, they landed in the dragon palace and stood on the bronze plate. Wei Zihong looked left and right, then pointed down and said, "Honored master, there seems to be something strange down there." Previously, Suwa said that every time he went down he would feel his mind tremble, unable to control himself, so disciple did not dare to enter. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "According to the records in the sect, the dragon god had cultivated for tens of thousands of years. His skills were extremely high. When he was at his peak, even those who had ascended would not be able to do anything to him. Although he is dead now, his power still exists. You guys naturally can't go near him. But now that I am here, there is no need to be afraid." Chapter 980. P.S. I want to hear more of your voices and receive more of your suggestions. Search for the WeChat public account, Kdred, and add me to support, Fight for the Great Path. Zhang Yan pointed with his finger and a tiny ray of light flew out and landed on the ground. At that moment, it was as if a fire had fallen on a pile of firewood. The pitch-black ground below suddenly shone with light. He stood there with his sleeves clasped behind his back. He looked down and saw that there was a heart-calming pillar that pierced straight down. In the depths of the pillar, he could vaguely see a dragon-shaped object coiled around it. However, after this light flashed, it quickly disappeared, and it was pitch black again. Just now, Wei Zihong only saw a blurry silhouette. He opened the divine eye on his forehead and wanted to see it clearly. However, when he looked, he felt dizzy and knew that it was serious. He quickly took 2 steps back and shook his head to make himself feel better. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Disciple, did you see it clearly?" Wei Zihong bowed and said, "Disciple is ashamed. My cultivation is shallow and I did not see it clearly." Zhang Yan said, "It is not your fault. There is something special about the real dragon. Even if you have cultivated the Yuanyin body, it is difficult to see the whole picture here. You need to get close to it to see it." He waved his sleeve and a ray of mana hit the stone tablet. It rumbled and the surface of the tablet gave out a spiritual light that flowed continuously. After a while, Wei Zihong heard the sound of the iron chains above his head. It kept shaking and colliding with each other. Then, his feet sank slightly and the bronze plate that the two of them were on was slowly lowered. The surroundings became dark and Wei Zihong did not dare to casually use his mana to look. After a while, he suddenly thought of something and said, "Master, when fellow Li was here just now, he was suppressed by the dragon god's aura and his body turned stiff. He could not speak. Is it because he is of a different species?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Although this person has a demon body, not to mention that he has cultivated the Yuanyin body, even if he is a first-stage cultivator, he should not be like this." Wei Zihong asked doubtfully, "Then why?" Zhang Yan said, "This dragon monarch can be considered as the leader of the 9-continent sky demons, the leader of all demons. Rumor has it that when his father's ancestor was alive, he gathered more than 3,000 heads of demon tribes in the world and swore a blood oath that their descendants were willing to serve him as their king. That Li Xiaomi was born in the water tribe, so his ancestor might be one of the demon kings who swore an oath. So, it's not surprising that he's involved in this." When Wei Zihong heard this, he couldn't help feeling a little worried. So there's such a reason. I heard that Demon Monarch Bai Ming only needs to bring a talisman over to command all the demons in the world. If fellow Taoist Li has such a flaw, will that fiendish demon make use of it? When Li Xiaomi was preaching the Tao, there was a person who wanted him to worship the demon lord. If he established a sect, his reputation would be great. If it reached the ears of the demon court of the North Nether continent, it was hard to guarantee that they would not have any ideas. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "You don't have to worry about this. To hold that talisman, one needs to have the blood essence of the demon monarch." After the former leader of the Qinsong school went on a northern expedition to the North Nether continent, this generation has been wiped out. The current demon monarch is just a branch descendant. He has long lost his power and can only bully some junior demon soldiers. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been unable to command the 8 tribes. Moreover, once a cultivator cultivates the Yuanying Dharma body, he can find a way to resist this method of restricting his bloodline. If he reaches the elephant realm, he will be completely useless. If not for the dragon monarch's corpse, with Li Xiaomi's cultivation, he wouldn't be so weak. When Wei Zihong heard this, he felt much more relieved. As the master and disciple spoke, the copper plate fell faster and faster, and it had already gone down a long distance. At this moment, Zhang Yan raised his hand and retracted his mana. The chain above him rattled, as if it was being pulled tightly. Then, his feet suddenly shook and he stopped. He said, "Disciple, take out some dim illumination pearls." Wei Zihong said yes and took out a dozen pearls the size of a dragon's eye. He used his mana to spread them out, and the surroundings became as bright as day. At this moment, when he looked again, his heart skipped a beat. Not far away, there was a huge dragon head in front of him. The top of its head was pointed upwards, and its blood-red beard was unusually ferocious. Under its chin, there was a shining pearl. At this moment, although the dragon's eyes were tightly shut, the monstrous murderous aura on its body made people suspect that it could wake up at any time. He walked to the edge of the copper plate and looked down. He saw that the dragon's body was locked by a thick iron chain, and was firmly tied to the big pillar that connected the top and bottom. It was just that it was too huge and he couldn't see the end of it. He actually couldn't tell how long it was. Zhang Yan said, "Disciple, do you see anything strange?" Wei Zihong looked at it, bowed, and said, "Disciple's knowledge is shallow. I don't know what's strange, please enlighten me." At this moment, Zhang Yan lightly waved his sleeve, and a strong wind rose from the ground. What was strange was that when the wind swept over, the dragon's body actually turned into a cloud of black smoke, drifting around, undulating. Only a long dragon spine could be faintly seen, connecting the head to the tail, appearing and disappearing from time to time. Wei Zihong was shocked and said, "Master, could it be that this azure dragon's body isn't flesh and blood, but a cloud of smoke?" Zhang Yan didn't answer, and instead asked, "Do you have a sword with you?" Wei Zihong said, "I do." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "You can try to chop it." Wei Zihong responded and took out a magic sword from his sleeve. He secretly channeled his spiritual power for a moment, and with a shake of his hand, the sword turned into a ray of rainbow light and slashed down. But when the blade of the sword reached the dragon's body, where it landed, there was a sound of metal clashing. Below it, there were pieces of iron scales, but they looked real and fake at the same time. The moment the sword left, it disappeared again and turned back into a cloud of smoke. He said in surprise, "The change between real and fake?" He knew that there were many magic treasures in the world, and after being refined by special methods, they could be between tangible and intangible and could even change between the two. This dragon's corpse looked like that, but he didn't know if it was born like that, or was it refined later? Zhang Yan shook his head and said in a deep voice, "It's not as simple as the change between real and fake, but this dragon god has cultivated his body to the point where it can change without end, and he can guard a part of the world. He is constantly changing and only relies on the dragon's spine to hold down his spiritual root, which is why he can protect his body from being contaminated by external qi and not be damaged for tens of thousands of years." He thought to himself, This dragon god's cultivation has reached such a level, and he can long be big or small at will, changing the wind and clouds, and is almost impossible to kill. If I were to fight him now, he wouldn't struggle at all. No matter what I do, and after thinking of all kinds of methods, I'm afraid the only way is to set up a boundary barrier outside and seal him up. I wonder how Patriarch took his life back then. Wei Zihong was deeply shocked. This dragon god had cultivated to such a level. Even old ancestor Tai Hung might not be able to compare to him back then. Zhang Yan looked at the dragon corpse for a long time, and his eyes flickered. At this moment, he had already cultivated to the 5th turn of the divine contract, so he naturally didn't need this azure dragon to increase his strength. However, this body couldn't be wasted, and it could be used to forge weapons, especially that dragon spine. If used to help in refining the earth-splitting universe leaf, it would definitely greatly increase its power. He thought for a moment. He said, "Disciple, do you remember when we were talking you said that there is a myriad origins transformation technique in Yaoyin sect? After mastering it, one can merge the external qi into one's mana, and from this, one can produce all kinds of miraculous effects?" Wei Zihong replied respectfully, "Master, this technique is indeed powerful, but it is also difficult to master. It needs the blood of the flood dragon." Zhang Yan smiled. "What if I use this azure dragon's blood?" Wei Zihong said, "Of course that would be good, but after 10,000 years, he said until here. He suddenly came back to his senses. This dragon body was not damaged for 10,000 years, there might still be blood essence left, and he couldn't help but be slightly excited. "Master, this..." Zhang Yan waved his hand and said, "If we want to use this dragon body, we must ask Northern Darkness Shinran to come forward. We have to ask Adept Dark North to come forward. There's no need to rush." Wei Zihong hurriedly nodded and said, "Everything is up to you, Master." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "There is another treasure here, come with me to take a look." He shook his sleeves, and under the twisting of the chains on the 4 sides, the copper plate sank again. But the more it went down, the richer the spiritual vigor, and Wei Zihong couldn't help but have some guesses. After an unknown period of time, the copper plate finally stopped moving. Instead, a jade lantern wheel appeared in front of it. It was in the shape of a precious lotus, about 10 feet tall, and inside it was a stone egg. It flickered between light and darkness, giving off a strange glow. Wei Zihong blurted out, "Could this be that heavenly fetus?" Zhang Yan said, "So Disciple also knows about this item." Wei Zihong said, "Disciple was weak and inexperienced before, only after Su Yihua told me that there was such a treasure here, but I wonder why Ancestor didn't take it away back then?" Zhang Yan said, "Even though this heaven and earth fetus can be considered a rare treasure, it's weak and fragile, like a newborn baby. Even a normal vibration of mana can destroy it. That's why I didn't use my mana just now. I'm afraid that if I'm not careful, I'll destroy it. Maybe the founding master placed it here to help the younger generation." Wei Zihong thought about it and felt that it was true. With his cultivation level, without the help of his master, it would be difficult for him to reach this place, and for a Jinren of the Grotto Heaven's cultivation level like his master, it might not be interested in this item. Zhang Yan looked at his feet and said, "Actually, this copper plate that we are standing on is also an instrument. It was set up by Ancestor back then. From what I see, this plate can block the fusion of internal and external qi, so no matter how much spiritual vigor this heavenly fetus absorbs, it will be firmly suppressed, unable to be used, and also unable to be absorbed by the dragon body." Wei Zihong was shocked and said, "Teacher, are you saying that the dragon god can come back to life after he has obtained enough spiritual vigor?" Zhang Yan smiled. "That can't be, but this dragon corpse is not bad. After a long period of spiritual vigor, there is no guarantee that it will not give birth to the demonic essence. Although it is not the dragon god himself, the various powers in his body are all the same." Wei Zihong could not help but feel lucky. If such a great demon came out, who knows how many people in the world could stop him? Zhang Yan said, "I came back to touch the dragon corpse, in case of any changes. Disciple, go and take down that heavenly fetus. Remember, do not use any mana." Wei Zihong responded, and slowly walked forward. He looked at it for a while, and then carefully took it down. Zhang Yan saw that he took it, and said, "Keep it well, and follow me out first. We will come back to get the dragon corpse later." Chapter 981. P.S. I want to hear more from you and receive more suggestions from you. Search for the WeChat account, Kdred, and follow me to support Fight for the Great Path. After Zhang Yan brought Wei Zihong back to the floating heavenly palace, he took out the fetus of universe and placed it in the Hall of Duzhen. Because the Yingtsang sect did not lack spiritual opportunity, and this item was too weak, there was no suitable place to place it in Donghua. Therefore, he looked elsewhere and prepared to place it in the heavenly cauldron of earth fire after the sacrificial refinement of the small broken pillar was completed. In the future, when the spiritium flourished, he would move the mountains and rivers, build temples, and set up restrictive formations. It would be more beneficial for cultivation after that. He wanted to collect the dragon blood later, but it needed to be stored in an artifact called Dan Heart Porcelain. He remembered that there was such an artifact in the Hall of Duzhen's treasury, so he ordered the Forbidden Spirit to fetch it. The Forbidden Spirit said, replying to Hall Master, "The treasure isn't in the hall now." Zhang Yan looked at it and asked, "Where is it then?" The Forbidden Spirit said, "When Hall Master Zhuo was still in power, Immortal Qin killed several golden flood dragons in order to forge a magical weapon. He borrowed this item to collect the flood dragon's blood, but he didn't return it after that. Do you want me to go and ask for it?" Zhang Yan thought about it and waved his hand. No need. He thought that Zhuo Yuming borrowed this artifact with the intention of giving it to him. If he asked for it now, Qin Yu would definitely be angry. Qin Yu wouldn't dare to refuse, but he could say that he couldn't find it. Even if it dragged on for a year, he might not be able to return it. It was not a rare artifact anyway, so he didn't have to think too much about it. Wei Zihong thought about it and said, "Master, the Yaoing clan seems to have this artifact too, but it was hidden in the small world of Mount Qingtong and I didn't bring it here. Why don't you let me take a look?" Zhang Yan nodded and said, "That's fine too. After you get it, you can go to the dragon house and wait." Wei Zihong nodded, bowed, and left the hall. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment, then checked the various things in his sleeve. Originally, he planned to use the precious materials gathered from outside the void sky as the main source. He also used some rare items to refine the heaven and earth leaf, but now that he had the dragon spine, he could replace it. Although these precious materials could also be used, if they were to be exchanged like this, there would be too much yang energy and not enough yin energy. Therefore, he should try to find some precious materials that were condensed from the yin energy of the earth. Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Take it for now." At this moment, the heaven and earth fetus had already been taken, so there was no need to be as careful as last time. He waved his sleeve, and with Wei Zihong he stepped on the wind, and in the blink of an eye, he was in front of the dragon head. Zhang Yan looked at it a few times. This dragon god had already refined the essence blood into one with his body, and if he wanted to take it from the dragon body, it would not be easy. If he followed the right path, he would need to sacrifice it in the furnace, and who knew how much effort it would take. But there was one place that was convenient, and he said, "Master Dark North, please cut off this dragon horn." As soon as he finished speaking, a black light that pierced through the sky and penetrated the earth swept across. In an instant, the sword Qi flew out, and its sharpness was so strong that it seemed like it could cut this dragon palace in half. The light spun on the dragon head, and with a clang, the pair of dragon horns was cut off, and 2 handfuls of black blood flew out. But as soon as it came into contact with the external Qi, it actually gathered into a ball, and turned into 2 droplets of blood the size of goose eggs. Zhang Yan waved his sleeve, and first kept the dragon horns, and then with a point of his finger, the blood droplets came over, and at the same time he said, "Disciple, catch it carefully." Wei Zihong did not dare to be slow, and raised the jade bowl to catch the 2 droplets of blood. At this moment, there were 2 clanging sounds, and the bowl shook violently. It looked like it was going to fall, and he couldn't help but be shocked. He quickly added a few more mana to it, and only then did it stabilize. When it was fine, he slowly called it in front of his eyes, and saw that the blood droplets rolled inside, and then there were wisps of smoke coming out, as if it was evaporating, and in a moment, it covered his whole body. He was also knowledgeable, and he could see that this thing was pushing out the impurities that just now came into contact with, and thought to himself, "This dragon blood is so pure, and doesn't allow any external substances. If I use this to cultivate Xian technique, once I succeed, I won't lose to any of the seniors in the sect. But when I cultivate, the effort I put in will also not be small." Zhang Yan said, "These 2 droplets of dragon blood are enough for you to cultivate. I will take the dragon spine later, and it won't be good for you to use it at the side, so you can leave first." Wei Zihong hurriedly rolled up his sleeve and kept the jade bowl. He bowed. "Teacher, disciple will leave." He stood up and turned into a conveyance light and flew out of the dragon palace. At this moment, the sword light turned and reached the top, and the voice of Dark North True Spirit came over. "This old dragon's body can't change easily, it won't be easy to attack." Zhang Yan smiled. "No matter how strong it is still a dead thing, and I have a plan. When I call out later, 'Reverend, please make your move.'" He walked forward a few steps and patted the mechanism monument. The thick chains shook, and one by one they were released. Once the chains were released, the dragon's body was free, and it suddenly turned into cloud energy, and was about to escape towards the door. How could Zhang Yan let it escape? And he used his mana. A pair of large hands appeared above, and then it pressed down. It looked like it was about to grab it. At this moment, the black cloud energy on the dragon's body shook, and turned into countless hard scales, which blocked below, causing the 5 fingers of the large hands to be unable to wrap around it. However, without the cover of the clouds and mist, that long dragon spine was also clearly revealed. The Dark North Sword Spirit had already seen through his intentions, and without waiting for instructions, it turned into a streak of black light and flew out, directly entering the dragon's head, and then it spat out sword energy from the bone gap. Many fine sword lights appeared from the dragon's spine, and in just an instant, from the inside to the outside, it scattered the cloud energy. It looked like the entire dragon's body was sliced up. Zhang Yan's spirit was roused, and he struck out talismans one after another, pasting them onto the dragon's spine. Every time he struck, the dragon's spine would shrink a little, and as he continued to exert his transcendence energy, it would become smaller and smaller. About a day and a night later, this dragon spine was only a foot long. He shook his sleeves and kept the item. The dragon monarch was just an empty shell after all. As long as he was still alive, he would be able to fend off the enemy even if he were to face a sharp killing weapon. He could even transform and fly away. It would not be so easy to deal with him. He bowed towards the person in front of him and said, "Thank you for your help, Dark North True Master." As soon as he said that, he heard a loud laugh, and a sword light flashed within the dragon palace, and with a sound of piercing through the air, he flew away without a trace. Zhang Yan smiled, and also turned into a streak of light, and not long after, he returned to the main hall of the Duzhen Hall, and said to the forbidden spirit who came up to greet him, "Open the furnace in the hall, and find 10 inky flood dragons here." The forbidden spirit said, "This servant will go arrange it now." After a few hours, 10 inky flood dragons came to the main hall, and they all bowed their heads and said, "Greetings, Hall Master." Zhang Yan said, "Today, I need to borrow the true fire in your body to refine the treasure. I wonder if you are willing?" One of the flood dragons said, "Hall Master, this little flood dragon is willing, but, the rest of the flood dragons didn't say anything. Zhang Yan saw that it was a little unwilling, and it was no wonder that true fire was also painstakingly cultivated, and it was the key to its transformation, and every time it was used, it would be less. He said with a smile, "You all refine the treasure diligently. I will naturally remember this hard work, and I will not treat you all unfairly in the future." Only then did the flood dragons rejoice. The forbidden spirit said at the side, "Master, these flood dragons are reckless and careless, and they have always been lazy. If we leave such a delicate matter to them, I'm afraid it will delay master's matter. Zhang Yan said, "Oh? Then what do you suggest?" The forbidden spirit said, "This servant is bold enough to ask master to issue a decree and transfer 30 people here to watch over these idiots." When those inky flood dragons heard this, they immediately glared at her, but the forbidden spirit ignored them. The inky flood dragon complained, "Hall master, that person sees us as food. What if he can't endure it and has a desire for food, then what should we do?" The forbidden spirit said coldly, "With this servant here, as long as you all abide by the rules, don't slack and work hard for master, then you will naturally be fine. Otherwise, what's the use of a bunch of trash? You might as well give them to that person to eat." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Then do as I say." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.